to note a few items. We conclude this year by saying farewell to several colleagues while welcoming new ones. Regent Beams is not here yet, but with this meeting, it will complete her year of service as the voting student regent. Regent Oladayo will become the voting student regent on July 1st. At that time, we will welcome Farah Halal from UMBC, and she will begin her first year of service as the non-voting student regent. While we will have occasion to formally honor these regents later in the year, I want to express my gratitude for their service today. This is also the last meeting for President Hrabowski and White. On behalf of the board, I want to thank you both for your outstanding leadership on your respective campuses and throughout the system. As outstanding leaders, you have both made our job as a board easier and a pleasure. And it's also been enjoyed to introduce and begin the transition soon for Dr. Asby and Dr. LaPree. Dr. LaPree will begin at Salisbury on July 15th, and the Chancellor and I and Bill Wood and Hugh Breslin were able to enjoy a very nice passing of the mace ceremony yesterday. And we had the former president, what will soon be the former president, and the future president all in attendance. So Dr. White, thank you for a wonderful afternoon. And Dr. Ashby will start UMBC on August 1st. Later in today's meeting, the board will vote on a resolution honoring the service of these outstanding regents and presidents. After Chancellor Perman's report, Regent Ganella and Vice Chancellor Herbst will present USM's draft strategic plan as today's educational forum. The plan, Vision 2030, from excellence to preeminence, is intended to secure the USM's impact well into the future. I look forward to a lively discussion, after which the board will take action on the plan. President Anderson, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you. But first, let me take a moment to thank you for hosting us on your beautiful campus. Yesterday's non-hard hat tour of the new pharmacy building was exciting. The building beautifully adds to the campus aesthetic. More importantly, it will be an innovative addition to the campus's teaching and learning enterprise, and one in which the campus can take pride. And I know I speak for everyone on what a great meal we had last night, especially the dessert. President Anderson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair Gooden. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, Regents, Presidents, and everyone else, I really am pleased to stand here and welcome you to our beautiful campus, the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. And it is my pleasure to bring you greetings on behalf of all of our campus, our faculty, our staff, and our students. I am so proud of the many activities that our campus has going on and the accomplishments of our faculty and staff. And I'm sure I could stand here for hours, but time does not permit me to do that. So I had to select a few items to just share with you this morning. And I want to be respectful of our time, and I've narrowed those down to about 3 key points. So I'll share with those with you, and then we'll move on. The first item I want to touch on is teachers. We all know that there is a national shortage of teachers. And we all know that the nation's population and students around the country are becoming more and more diverse. Yet in our classrooms, K through 12, that is not the case. The shortage of minority teachers is even more profound when you think about the male teacher of color. They are lacking, very few. So we are fortunate here at UMES in that we have hired the 2019 Teacher of the Year for the state of Maryland, Dr. Richard Warren. Dr. Warren, a teacher of color and a STEM teacher of color, could not be here with us this morning, but I asked him to bring you greetings virtually. And the reason I asked him to bring you greetings in this video clip that we're about to show, you will see that Dr. Warren is trying to solve that problem of male teachers of color shortage. So let's cue up the video, please, Jason, and take a look at that.
Greetings, everyone. Before I begin, I would like to pause for the cause and thank you all for your time and attention. I am incredibly excited to be here and to share with you something that I believe is highly important and cannot be emphasized any more than what it is. I'm Dr. Richard Warren, and I want to share with you a groundbreaking program called the UMES Men of Color in Education Program. So less than 2% of American educators are Black men. And studies have shown that having more than one educator of color, especially a Black male educator of color, can produce dramatic results for our children. Having one male teacher of color in the classroom reduces dropout rates significantly, encourages students to go to college, and helps with behavioral issues in today's classrooms. Yet, the number remains 2%. I'm pleased that UMES wants to be a part of this solution. And so the UMES Men of Color in Education program has a three-pronged approach. The first approach is the high school teacher university. The second approach is the university cohort. And the third approach is the Man the Shore network. And so we decided to create a program that recruits, supports, and develops students who want to become teachers with a special emphasis on our Black and brown boys. We will support them along their high school, college, and career continuum so that they can be successful and make a difference in the lives of our children. In the high school teacher university, it's a 5-week dual enrollment experience where we teach a college level class to students in high school, and they can earn college credits in early introductory teacher preparation courses. The second, the university cohort. That is a multi-year cohort for our Black and brown students here at the university, where we provide them with the academic, social, emotional, and cultural support to thrive here at the university and to thrive in their career. These students will be placed in early field experiences where they get to go into the schools. They'll be provided with mentorship from other Black and brown educators in schools, and they'll be provided with teacher licensure support. They also will be supplied with mentorship beyond even the scope of the university, and with job placement. And the third prong is the Man the Shore network. We have a community of educators on the Eastern Shore, specifically Black and brown men, teachers, and school leaders who are passionate about making sure that we support our high schoolers and that we support our college students on this trajectory towards becoming an educator. We have a database of over 50 men of color on the Eastern Shore in education, and we meet quarterly to talk about what does it mean to recruit, what does it mean to retain, and what does it look like to demonstrate scholarship in the educational marketplace. And all of these things, I'm pleased to announce, are going to continue here at the university, and I look forward to expanding this and to making a difference in all the lives of our children, especially our Black and brown boys. Thank you.
And imagine, Dr. Warren created this program in the midst of a pandemic and got it kicked off. Imagine what it could be like today if we had not had that pandemic. So this is just one initiative we wanted to share with you this morning. You can go ahead and applaud. He's not here, but we will let him know. Yes. The second point that I want to share with you today, also in the midst of the pandemic, in 2019, we, as you know, received a little bit of extra donation from a private donor, and we were able to leverage that money to actually qualify for a $2 million grant from the Maryland Department of Commerce's E-Innovation and Initiative Fund. We used those funds to create an endowed chair in entrepreneurship and innovation. We are thrilled that Dr. Pamela Allison was selected from a national search and holds this new endowed chair position. So just briefly, I'm bringing Dr. Allison, who is here today in person. to the podium. She has extensive background in business creation, and she is here to share with you our entrepreneur program. Dr. Allison?
Good morning.
Morning.
So the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, our mission is to assist students, alumni, faculty, and the community grow, start, maintain their businesses. And we're going to do that through 3 different approaches: education, physical resources, and professional services. So as Dr. Anderson mentioned, we did get the donation to begin this position and to begin the center. And we have received additional funding through the Ratcliffe Foundation to start our Makerspace, which you'll see in a moment. And we currently have 2.7 million in proposals under consideration. And it's very important that we have this center here in Somerset County and here at UMES. As many of you know, Somerset County is one of the poorest counties in the entire state. However, what you might not know is while 48% of our population identifies as a minority by race, only 17% of businesses in Somerset County are owned by minorities. So education, we're going to begin to instill a culture of entrepreneurship using the EMP, the Entrepreneur Mindset Profile, which focuses on 14 different scales such as persistence, risk acceptance, things that are important to entrepreneurs, but important to all students. We'll have workshops and seminars from everything on how to practice entrepreneurship to how to start your business, to how to maintain and grow. We'll have IP attorneys and mentors available. And we'll be doing some pitch competitions. We're not looking to compete with the hatchery right up the road. Instead, we'd like to complement the hatchery. We want to get our students ready to participate in the biannual competition by Salisbury University. Our Makerspace, I'm very excited to present these pictures because we are brand new over in Kaya Hall. This is a very nice facility, but it is planned to be a temporary facility. This is where entrepreneurs can come to prototype, brand their business, and get assistance with any areas they need. The reason we have the proposals underway and being considered right now is because the eventual goal is to have us move into the Frederick Douglass Library. Library is a hub of resources, and we, as the Entrepreneurship Center, are a hub of entrepreneurial resources. So it makes sense to put us together. There we'll have an auditorium available, as well as a larger makerspace, shared spaces for entrepreneurs to work, and conference rooms. And then finally, professional services. Very important to have mentors available that can help guide our students to become entrepreneurs. We have TEDCO available to come mentor, as well as help fund through their programs technology businesses that would like to come to market. We also partnered with TEDCO, as well as all 4 HBCUs in the state of Maryland, to create the Open Institute for Black Women Entrepreneur Excellence. We have many certifying agencies, all of which we have connections now for women business owners, minority business owners, LGBT, and veterans. And I'm happy to say that the Veterans Business Association is looking to us to become a partner on the task force for the nation. And finally, very excited to announce we have the student chapter of the national group, Collegiate Entrepreneurs Organization, here on campus now. And they are there to provide resources to all students, to help nationwide, to give mentors, to give capital, and to give any expertise they need. Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you, Dr. Allison. I think you'll agree with me that both the programs that Dr. Warren and Dr. Allison are bringing to our institution will be game changers in a number of ways. Finally, what I would like to share with you is we are embarking on, as you see, new initiatives. And one of the things that I've learned, and we have learned as a campus, is that many people see UMES as an unknown institution or a jewel hidden over here on the Eastern Shore. Many do not even realize that we're an HBCU and a proud 1890 land grant HBCU. So with this in mind, I recently commissioned a marketing and rebranding of our campus. We had about a dozen different logos all around the campus. And with this, we're going to have an entire university brand that has not only a logo, a tagline, and an elevator pitch that everyone will be able to hopefully memorize and repeat. Today, we're going to roll that out and let you see that, and you'll be the first to see it. And then next week, we'll continue to roll it out with our academic leadership. So what I'll show to you very briefly, we hired TBC Incorporated to do this particular study. TBC conducted a lot of research with our campus stakeholders, with alumni, with students, it was hundreds of individuals, and they spent several months doing this research. Qualitative and quantitative analysis were done and conducted by them. And what they found is that we had a consistent key messages that you see on this particular slide. As a result of their particular work, they have shared with us a new elevator pitch. I say new, I asked the campus, I don't think we'd had one before, and we had not. And this elevator pitch, as you will see here, the University of Maryland Eastern Shore is a top 20 HBCU that believes in your potential, invest in your success. We are a family who values who you are, where you are come from, and where you want to go. Our strong academics attribute affordable tuition and mission-driven culture help students of all backgrounds soar above and beyond. And finally, this is our new logo that we will be rolling out very, very shortly. TBC has assisted us with an implementation rollout plan. We'll be sharing that, as I said, in a retreat with our senior academic leaders next week on a 2-day retreat that we have. But we wanted you to at least get the first glimpse. I think it will not be confusing to people that we are a proud 1890 HBCU going forward. And I want to thank the marketing team and TBC, who could not be here today, for all of the work that they did in helping us bring this to fruition. So I applaud them as well. Thank you. And finally, Madam Chair, since I have the podium, just want to congratulate a couple of my fellow presidents, President Bro, UMES. We want to congratulate you and the entire Bowie State campus on student Miles Frost on his recent Tony Award. It touches all of us. We want to congratulate President Pines on being selected as one of the Daily Record's top Maryland influential Marylanders. We appreciate that, President Pines. And finally, it is with deepest gratitude that I say to President White and President Grabowski, thank you for all of the support your school has given to our university. I don't know if you know it, but we have a lot of collaborative efforts that we do with Salisbury University as well as with UMBC. And I'm going to miss these two gentlemen who have been here to help support me and my efforts. However, Chuck and Freeman, I will make sure that I welcome Valerie and Lynn and that we will continue the collaborative efforts. But I will also look forward to seeing you in your retirement and saying hello every now and then. But our campus just wants to say good luck to you in your retirement. Thank you so much. Madam Chair, thank you very much for allowing me a few minutes to brag about my campus and to show you how we soar in everything that we do.
Well, wait, President Anderson, Regent Atman has a comment.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, Madam President. Great to be here. There's so many fantastic things going on campus. Just with respect to the new entrepreneurship program, I wanted to point out that thanks to the leadership of Regent Leggett, this morning we will be considering on the consent agenda an item related to funding early pilots at not the traditional Research One universities, but at other universities that are conducting important innovation and research. And so I hope your team will take advantage of that.
Thank you very much. We definitely will. And I'm
Thank
sure Dr. Allison is taking notes over there. Thank you.
Okay,
And
sure. Thank you.
finally, Chair, I just want to thank my entire campus for all the work that we did to put the board meeting together and to have you host you in our home. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now the Chancellor will give us the Chancellor's report.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair Gooden. Let me also thank our host this morning, President Anderson. It's very clear. There's so much happening at UMES, and it's good that we're all here to see it firsthand. I know the governor got out ahead of all of us by a few days this week, but it's only right that UMES is winning so much attention. I echo Chair Gooden in saying farewell to distinguished regents, Deanna Johnson, Gary Gill, Ada Beams. We look forward to celebrating them later this year. Of course, we're excited to welcome new leaders to the system. Dr. Valerie Shears Ashby at UMBC and Dr. Carolyn Ringer-LaPrey at Salisbury. My remarks today and my accompanying written report serve as my annual report to the board. Given that this is a year in review, my comments will include recent news, but also some of the biggest achievements our schools have celebrated over the entire year. Let me begin today with our host, UMES. As President Anderson has shared with us, it's an exciting time for the school. Last year, UMES launched its True North partnership with Alaska Airlines to remove the barriers that prevent students of color from entering aviation science. And this year, they named their first scholarship recipient, Isaiah Brown. UMES's PGA Golf Management Program also got a boost. Troon has announced scholarships for students enrolled in the program, which is the only one of its kind among US HBCUs. And just last month, Princeton University announced a partnership with UMES and 4 fellow historically Black institutions. The project funds and promotes research between HBCU faculty and their counterparts at a distinguished Ivy League school. Heidi, congratulations. The University of Maryland College Park had a year that again proved its leadership in innovation. Last summer, the NSF awarded College Park $15 million to lead the Mid-Atlantic Innovation Hub, training science and engineering researchers in entrepreneurship so they can advance US global leadership in innovation thinking. And last fall, the university announced a $20 million partnership with quantum computing startup IonQ to create the National Quantum Lab at Maryland, cementing College Park as the worldwide hub for quantum innovation. And this spring, the university dedicated the E.A. Fernandez Idea Factory. It's a $67 million building designed to foster technology development in quantum engineering, robotics, rotorcraft, and multimedia. And I was grateful to join President Pines and President Bro at last month's dedication of the plaza honoring Lieutenant Richard Collins III, memorializing the Bowie State student and serving forever as a daily repudiation of the bigotry and hate that took his life. Daryl, thank you for your leadership. Frostburg State University has elevated its efforts in student access and success. Frostburg began the year announcing improved transfer agreements with Allegheny College of Maryland and Garrett College, providing students a more seamless transition into FSU. They've also announced the first-year experience for all students, providing them a university advisor and a faculty mentor to help them adjust to campus life. Frostburg's new accelerated pharmacy track, that's a partnership with our host institution, UMES, and it allows completion of a Doctor of Pharmacy in just 6 years rather than the traditional 8. And finally, FSU alumni and friends rallied for Frostburg's first ever Bobcat Giving Day. 1,200 donors in just 24 hours contributed $150,000 to FSU. It's a demonstration of how committed they are to Frostburg students, programs, and services. Ron, well done. At the University of Baltimore, the Bob and Renee Parsons Foundation committed $2.4 million to support veteran and active military students. It will enrich U-Balt's abiding focus on students connected to the armed forces. Earlier this year, U-Balt launched its Center for Criminal Justice Reform, made possible by School of Law alumnus Sam Rose. And last December, U-Balt celebrated the very first graduate of its Second Chance college program. James Ruffin III began his college career at the Jessup Correctional Facility, and he ended it 5 years later, crossing the stage at the Lyric Opera House with a degree in Human Services Administration. The system is exploring, following U-Balt's lead in expanding prison education. And finally, this summer, Baltimore City 10th and 11th graders will be immersed in augmented reality at U-Balt's Space Tech Camp, supported by NASA's Minority University Research and Education Project. Great work, Kurt. Bowie State began this year cutting the ribbon on its entrepreneurship living learning community, creating an environment that stimulates innovation and collaboration. Not long after that, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services awarded Bowie $10 million, the school's largest grant in 2 decades, to improve public health informatics and technology. And I too have to give some love to 2 BSU student standouts. Junior Paige Blake was appointed to President Biden's Board of Advisors on HBCUs, joining some of the nation's best-known Black leaders in business, academia, and entertainment. And Sunday night, we all know there was a lot of cheering all across Maryland as BSU junior Miles Frost took home a Tony for his role in MJ, the musical. It was Mr. Frost's Broadway debut, and his win made history. He's the youngest solo performer ever to clinch Best Actor. Aminta, I know how proud you are of all of this. Salisbury University began the academic year with a new brand campaign, Make Tomorrow Yours, promising students that they'll be seen, heard, and celebrated at SU. Salisbury made good on that promise with the Dave and Patsy Rommel Center for Entrepreneurship, which supports student ventures, and with their extraordinary dedication to the Fulbright program, SU had a record 9 students and alums with Fulbright awards this cycle. And the school is just one of 5 nationwide recognized as a top producer of both Fulbright students and scholars. So as Salisbury says so long to Dr. White as its leader, but he stays on the faculty. There's one tribute that I think is especially fitting. Last month, the university's Center for Equity, Justice, and Inclusion was named for President White, whose mission is to make sure every student at Salisbury feels welcomed, respected, valued. Thank you, Chuck. UMBC can reflect on a year of enormous success. Last fall, UMBC celebrated a NASA award of $72 million for the new Goddard Earth Sciences Technology and Research Center. That's a national consortium led by UMBC focused on Earth and atmospheric science. This spring, UMBC received the largest gift in its history, $21 million from the Sherman Family Foundation to launch the Betsy and George Sherman Center, which expands UMBC's work in early childhood and urban education, creating a national model for advancing excellence in city schools. And capping years of tireless work by faculty, administrators, staff, students, UMBC recently earned Research 1 status, the Carnegie classification's highest level of research performance, and honoring President Hrabowski's national leadership in STEM equity and excellence. You all know that the Howard Hughes Medical Institute announced the $1.5 billion Freeman Hrabowski Scholarship Program to diversify the U.S. We talk a lot about diversifying the U.S. biomedical workforce. It's good to put very significant money to it and attach our colleague and friend's name to it. Freeman, none of us can imagine a more fitting legacy. Thank you. Coppin State University, one of 6 HBCUs nationwide, taking part in Complete College America's $2.5 million digital learning infrastructure project. That's going to build an integrated framework for digital learning at HBCUs, one that improves student outcomes. And this spring, Coppin State University announced a partnership with the Charles Schwab Foundation and Advisor Services, accompanied by the single largest gift in CSU's history. The partnership positions the university as a major hub for financial education, financial services, and it's going to educate the next generation of Black certified financial analysts and planners. And this month, thank you, Anthony, I was thrilled to join a groundbreaking ceremony for the Keys Community Healing Village, supported with more than $1 million secured by Coppin State. And when this center opens in West Baltimore in 2024, CSU will be on site offering mental health services, financial literacy workshops, and wellness resources. Anthony, I know under your leadership, Coppin is deeply engaged with your neighbors. Thank you. UMGC spent the year growing its partnerships and its reputation around the world. The year began with a new 5-year contract with the U.S. Department of Defense to educate troops on military installations in the Middle East, North Africa, and downrange locations. Then UMGC's reach exploded with new academic partnerships with community colleges in Baltimore, Philadelphia, Chicago, California, and its impact deepened with ed tech and industry partnerships like those with Springboard, Victory XR, and Amazon. And just last month, UMGC teamed up with the Capital Region Minority Supplier Development Council to launch a 6-week executive education program to help CEOs and companies of color cultivate business resilience and growth post-pandemic. Thank you, Greg. Last fall, UMCs won national attention when researchers mapped the DNA of a blue crab for the first time ever. Cracking the genomic code it was a very deceptively complex process, given that the blue crab, this is interesting, Marylanders, has more genes than we do. But it's essential to facilitating crab reproduction and resilience, which makes jobs in Maryland, apart from the good food. UMCs has also announced an expansive partnership with Baltimore-based US Wind. With $11 million over 8 years, UMCs is going to execute 3 research projects aimed at understanding the potential effects of offshore wind development on marine mammals, fish, and birds. All economic impact here. And UMCs has released its annual report card on the health of the Chesapeake Bay and its watershed, also critical to the Maryland economy. The Bay earned a grade of C, and the watershed improved slightly this year to C+. UMCs has begun including social and economic indicators in its report card to show how environmental health is linked to wealth, to wellness, to the quality of life in communities that abut the Bay. So thank you very much. I know Peter can't be here, but thank you for being here, Lynn. RHECs, our regional higher education centers, continue to innovate how they meet the needs of their learners and local employers. The universities at Shady Grove launched its 10-year strategic plan, USG 2.0. It's an ambitious plan emphasizing access and opportunity and pathways to career success. Supporting that plan, just a few days ago, USG announced a new partnership with Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery College. It's called the Ready Institute. It will drive the development of data-informed pathway programs that prepare students from the earliest grades for the rigors of college and ultimately for high-demand jobs. It promises a model for strengthening the P20 pipeline and demonstrably improving learner outcomes, opportunities for kids to ultimately get ahead. Last month, I visited the USM at Hagerstown, talking with the Board of Advisors and with the faculty, staff, employers, education, and community partners about how the center's positioning itself to meet future challenges in that part of the state. And it was terrific to spend the day hearing from those who know the students and the region the best and understand how to innovate what they offer. Similarly, I had the pleasure of meeting with leadership at the USM at Southern Maryland several weeks ago. I visited initially for the grand opening of the SMART building last fall, and as I said, made a return trip this month to see that space in action. Just like the governor beat us here to UMES, House Leader Steny Hoyer and Senator Ben Cardin beat me down to USM-SM by about a week, but of course, I'm glad they were there because the facility promises so much to the economy, to jobs there, not just for our R&D enterprise, but really lots of opportunities for the region. Ann, Mark, Eileen, Your leadership at our regional centers is really so impressive. Towson University had a remarkable year. Last fall, I was at Towson twice in a week, first for the grand opening of its science complex, and then to break ground on its College of Health Professions building. When that new building opens in 2024, it will solidify TU's leadership as the largest provider of health professionals in Maryland. Towson is also establishing itself as a national leader in cybersecurity. Last fall, TU won a $2+ million grant from the NSA to lead a task force dedicated to cataloging and improving U.S. cybersecurity curricula. And Towson University launched an interdisciplinary cybersecurity center and appointed its very first endowed professor of cybersecurity. This year, Towson celebrated a record 4 students and alums chosen as Fulbright winners, the most in TU history. Kim, thank you for your leadership. UMB is celebrating a year of impact. On President Gerald's inauguration day, his friend Lawrence Heyman announced an $18 million gift to support students and healthcare providers right here on Maryland's Eastern Shore, where the two men grew up. Researchers at UMB School of Medicine won $5.5 million from NIH to prepare the next generation of global health scientists, and their colleagues at the UMB School of Dentistry won over $5 million to study new ways of treating and preventing migraines. And the Maryland Poison Center in UMB School of Pharmacy celebrated 50 years of life-saving triage, treatment, and prevention services. The center handled over 37,000 poison exposure cases last year alone. And yes, I talk about this a lot. Just last month, the inaugural class of UMB Pure Scholars, 17 high schoolers from West Baltimore, are making history as they head to college this fall. 2 of them coming right here to UMES. President Anderson, please take good care of them. Bruce, congratulations on the year. Now, stepping back a little, I want to emphasize that it's been a great year for the system as a whole. Our institutions are all nationally acclaimed, all of them ranked in the most cited publications. As I shared in April, we earned incredibly strong support. In Annapolis, we maintained an outstanding bond rating. Our universities are more diverse than ever before. We're keeping our tuition affordable and our quality excellent. And every day, we use our influence, assets, and expertise to enrich our communities in multiple ways. We're a research powerhouse. The NSF just ranked the combined research enterprise of College Park and UMB in the top 10 among U.S. public universities, top 20 overall. We translate that research into path-breaking products, innovations, companies, jobs. And we make money for Maryland. The USM generated more than $10 billion in economic impact last year, supported approximately 60,000 Maryland jobs. For every dollar the state invests in the system, we return nearly $3 to Maryland's people, families, and communities. Importantly, we graduate exceptionally well-educated students, prepared for citizenship, for leadership, for professional success. And it's in looking to that future that I now turn briefly to our strategic plan. In a moment, Regent Ganella and Vice Chancellor Herbst will discuss that plan, Vision 2030. I certainly will not steal their thunder, but I will talk briefly about why it's so important. Higher education is at an inflection point. We're facing pressures on enrollment, which have been exacerbated by the pandemic. We're facing disruption within the sector from technology, from for-profit and not-for-profit companies. Expectations are changing among students about the very nature of learning and work, where it happens and when and how. And as college costs escalate and student debt balloons, there's growing skepticism, yes, about the value of a degree. What these existential challenges require of us is not window dressing. It isn't a tweaking of our business model. These challenges require a fundamental shift in what we do and how we do it. And here's where this shift needs to happen. Historically, the system's work has been centered on our institutions and on our processes. Now we're going to center that work more than ever before on our students. In the past, we've focused on degree output. Now we're focused on learner outcomes. Where we've been siloed, we have to be collaborative. Where our innovation has been institution-bound, it must be scaled. And this is the key. Where we've been excellent, and I believe we've been excellent, we must be preeminent. You've likely read this line in the executive summary, and I quote, "Vision 2030 is by intention and design more than a plan to sustain what has been. It's a promise to transform what will be." That is my promise. That's our promise. It's our promise to our students and to our state. And I'm excited for us to get started. Madam Chair, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. Are there any questions for the Chancellor? Seeing none,
you.
today's educational forum is on strategic planning. Regent Ganella and Vice Chancellor Herbst will present to you the final draft of USM's new strategic plan. Describe the process that led to this point and the next steps. I want to emphasize the importance of this work to the USM. For any organization, strategic planning is critical to understanding an organization's direction, measures of success, and accountability. For complex organizations such as the USM, the strategic plan helps focus our priorities as we work across 12 very different universities, simultaneously pursue multiple missions, serve a range of students, faculty, staff, communities, and so many other constituencies, and address the present as we prepare for tomorrow. The plan achieves just that and more, and I look forward to sharing it with you today. With that, I want to thank Regent Ganella for his steering of this process, Vice Chancellor Herbst for her staffing this process, the strategic plan work group members, and many of the stakeholders who provided various inputs to the process. Regent Ganella, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chancellor Perman. Always a tough act to follow. I will do my best. And while you may not have stole our thunder, you said it much better than I think we will say it. So thank you. I am pleased to be here this morning and to present to all of you the USM's new 10-year strategic plan, Vision 2030, from excellence to preeminence. To echo what the Chancellor said, this plan really does represent a fundamental shift to how the system identifies and achieves new priorities in teaching, research, and economic development. I know that many of you have seen other strategic plans in higher education. Our plan really is different. Instead of focusing on the needs of the institutions, Vision 2030 will instead center the USM on the needs of the students and learning outcomes, while it drives economic growth and serves our state and nation. I think you'll be impressed with the final draft product, and in a moment, Vice Chancellor Herbst will walk us through the plan's 5 key priorities and select goals. But let me first provide you with a little context on how we got here. For the last 18 months, I've had the pleasure of leading a 7-member Board of Regents strategic work group. This group includes Regents Atman, Beams, Fish, Leggett, Neal, and Chair Gooden. We were assisted in our work by Huron Consulting and key leaders throughout the USM. I'm also pleased to say that the outreach in this process was extensive, including more than 25 internal and external stakeholder groups. Our stakeholders ranged from USM's 3 advisory councils, faculty, staff, and presidents, to the leadership of the General Assembly. Other stakeholders included leaders from the Maryland State Department of Education and the K-12 community, Maryland Higher Education Commission, Greater Washington Partnership, Greater Baltimore Committee, business leaders throughout the state, the Maryland Agriculture Education Foundation, and the Maryland Tech Council. It truly was a collaborative process. In addition to the stakeholder consultation, we also engaged in an extensive environmental scan that included opportunities for public input through an online feedback portal that accompanied published materials on the system's strategic plan website. We've developed a short video to help introduce the plan to our stakeholders. Perhaps we can share that now.
Well, this plan is really all about cultural change. The university system is moving from a university-centered perspective to a student-centered perspective. And, you know, for many years, we wanted the students to meet us where we are. Now we're saying we're going to meet the students where they are. And what that means is very simply that we're going to provide the financial services, we're going to provide the academic services, and we're going to provide the outreach services to make this a better experience for all students.
You know, these are difficult times. We often think about these are difficult times for higher education, but that's not the point. These are difficult times for the world. These are difficult times for our nation. We have significant public health issues, significant medical issues. We have problems with the labor workforce in the sense that there aren't enough people to fill the jobs that we need, and so many of those jobs require a higher education. We've got issues with diversity, inclusion, being fair to people. We've got racial tensions. And you know, when you think about it, the solution to all of that is the opportunity to get a higher education. And we are capable of innovating. Nobody should say that higher education can't innovate. We did it in 2 weeks last March.
It's really a response to the urgency that you talked about. It's a plan that is aspirational yet achievable, and yet it has the ability to address immediate issues. For example, making sure that our salaries for our faculty and staff are competitive, and yet it has long-term goals like building significantly on the $1.5 billion of research the system does annually. It allows for accountability and transparency. It provides a a clear path for our constituencies to understand that they're going to get results in year 1, year 2, year 3, and not a decade down the line. I think the level of engagement, the commitment and the passion for not only the process, but the plan itself. As I have a lot of experience with strategic planning in my day job, I work a lot with people to develop around a mission or a cause, help people to develop messages and a roadmap and explain why it's so important, the mission and the cause, and then create a plan for them to implement it. Most of the time that takes significant convincing or selling. There was no convincing or selling at all around this process. Business, government, K through 12, students and their parents, faculty, staff, and members of the USM itself. Everybody wanted to be engaged.
We need resources that allow us to accommodate more students and different students as we reach out to non-traditional students and adult learners. And we also need to be able to scale up our research enterprise. You know, we're very fortunate. We live in a state that invests in its universities and invests in its students. And so we have the wherewithal to do these things. We have to have the mindset to do them. And that's the harder part of this. And I think the strategic plan provides a roadmap that allows us to begin to approach that point.
So I think that's a great overview, but it is only one component of what will be the public rollout. And with all due respect to my fellow participants, we talk about Tony Awards. I don't think that's going to win any awards, but hopefully it provides a little bit of an overview and some context to this process and what this plan is all about. And before I hand things over to Ellen, I just want to again emphasize how impressed I have been throughout this process by the overall level of engagement and commitment and passion by everyone involved. There really was no need to convince people or sell them on this process. Business, government, K through 12, students, faculty, staff, and as we mentioned, members of the USM across the board, from the presidents down to every member of the USM staff. Everybody wanted to be engaged. Everybody wanted to be part of the process. Everybody was committed to the ultimate success and the plan itself. And I really think that that's going to show and does show in the final draft of the plan. So we're obviously very excited about it. And I'd like to thank everybody, particularly Chair Gooden and the Chancellor, for allowing me this opportunity to be involved. I'd like to thank all of the folks that were involved in this process, especially my fellow regents on the work group. And the amazing staff of the USM. We talk about it all the time, but I witnessed it day after day in terms of their engagement, their involvement, and the high quality work that they put in on projects and initiatives like this. So I get the pleasure now of introducing one member of that amazing staff, and that is Vice Chancellor Ellen Herbst, to walk us through the details. Ellen?
Thank you, President Hrabowski. Good morning, everyone. As the Chancellor, Regent Gooden, and Regent Cannella have indicated, it did not take a lot of convincing for folks to participate in this process. And there was a remarkable confluence of agreement on what was driving us. And that's because I think we all realized we are at an inflection point, not just the system, not just Maryland, but higher education is at an inflection point. And what we're facing over the remainder of this decade and into the next. The challenges and pressures that the Chancellor highlighted are significant. And we are now hearing that many say will be the greatest we have seen since the turmoil of the 1960s. Certainly, they are the most significant we have faced since the system was created in 1988. And that is the reason, the entire group has worked so diligently to craft a strategic plan that seeks to go well beyond the scope and ambition of our previous strategic plans. This is a plan that, as the chancellor says, is designed to be transformative. It's a plan that aspires to drive each and every one of us to be relentless in our focus on serving learners and their needs, preeminent in the quality of instruction, research, learning opportunities, and support services that we offer, and in doing so, remain and be even more the economic, educational, and social service engine at the heart of a better, more equitable, and frankly, a more just Maryland. I want to take you back a moment and remind you how we got to where we are today. You may recall from the board's fall retreat this past October when we walked you through the initial framework for the plan, which included the initial priorities and proposed goals, which, while we have continued to tweak and refine since the fall, have remained remarkably consistent to what you all saw in the fall. But at that time, we noted that there was a mandate given to us working on this plan by the board work group and the chancellor. And there's really 4 parts to it. The first was to pay attention to the short term, continue to achieve all the good you have heard in the next 3 to 5 years as our environment is changing around us, but also to prepare and position for that longer term, the next decade and beyond. We were also told, don't recreate the wheel. We have a number of groups already working on several of the priority areas. For instance, the board's enrollment work group and the branding and marketing task force. And our intention in implementation is to incorporate all that work in the execution of the plan. We were told to make the process more inclusive and bring additional voices into the process. And finally, and I can't tell you how many times because I lost track, the chancellor said this to me, be bold. Taking these mandates as our guiding principle, the USM has put together a planning process that is more extensive than anything we have done in the last 20 years. And you've heard from both the chancellor and Regent Ganella about our extensive engagement with stakeholders and the public website that we have had up for over a year that produced draft content as it was being developed and asked the public to provide input. We also actually conducted a review of each institution's strategic plans that exist today and analyzed those goals, as well as looked at the progress we've made in previous system plans. And finally, and this was all with the help of our consulting group, we did a workforce needs analysis and looked at the major workforce shortages and growth areas in Maryland. All of that has resulted in a plan that, as you can see from the materials, takes place in 3 phases, each one about 3 years long. As we move through those phases, the goals are deliberately designed to be very concrete in the first 3 years and to build on the resources and strengths we have. But at the same time, continuing to plan and build off of those shorter term goals to achieve what are more aspirational and ambitious goals and a vision by the end of this decade. Next slide. Now, here's the good news. Although the plan is extraordinarily ambitious and transformative, we are starting from a position of strength. And we want everyone to understand that. We don't want the ambition of the new plan to hide the achievements we've already all made. As many of you know, we are a system that has essentially added a campus worth of students to our enrollment since 2010. We've added the equivalent almost of another Towson in terms of enrollment. And the better news is 3/4 of that growth is coming from traditionally underserved populations. At 28,000, and that's a good thing because guess where the growth in the future is going to come from? At 28,000 bachelor degrees awarded annually, we are now responsible for 80% of the new graduates produced by Maryland institutions each year. Almost 41% of the bachelor degrees awarded in 2021 by system institutions were in workforce critical STEM or healthcare fields. That 41% is up from just 25% in 2010. Next slide. But we aren't just a workforce producer. Faculty at the USM institutions have brought in over $1.5 billion in extramural funding in 2020. That was up nearly 13% from the start of the prior decade. And faculty, together with staff and students, have helped create more than 600 startup companies since 2012. So we certainly have a strong base to work from there. Next slide. I am not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because the chancellor, more eloquently than I ever could, went through what we're looking to transform from and to. I will say that the plan is designed to be a continuum of transformation. We recognize that change is the hardest thing that leaders have to do, and change has to happen over time. So it's a continuum. Next slide, please. Now, as anyone who's done strategic planning will tell you, the basis for a truly effective strategic plan is not really in the specific words we use for a goal or a priority statement. A truly effective strategic plan is having clarity on three essential elements. Mission. In other words, why do we exist? Vision. What do we want to achieve? And finally, values. What do we believe in? What do we prioritize? If we can answer those three questions clearly, with great clarity, the rest, which is more the transactional elements of a strat plan, the goals, the priorities, the strategies, will flow from there. So just as clarity has been emphasized, the chancellor and board also emphasized the need to be relevant. It's been a long time since we updated our mission, vision, and value. In fact, it was 2010 when last we updated it. So the need to be relevant was clear. We want to reflect the needs, challenges, and opportunities that our institutions, our students, frankly, our state and our nation are facing now, not just right this minute, but over the next 10 years. And so our mission is to educate and serve the people of Maryland. We will advance equity, justice, and opportunity, and we will produce research and scholarship that improves lives. Next slide. Similarly, we revamped the system's vision, with this vision becoming one that's more appropriate to the realities and needs of our changing higher ed landscape. While our previous plan spoke of preparing graduates, and indeed I just bragged on the number of graduates we produce every year, and that will remain important. In this plan, we do talk about transforming into a learner-centered organization. That includes graduating people with degrees. It also includes providing credentials to a wider part of our population. We envision using our knowledge to solve problems that have a direct, meaningful impact on our communities here at home and globally. And finally, and importantly, our vision is to dedicate ourselves to the relentless pursuit of equity, opportunity, and justice for all. Next slide. Our values. This was a very fun and challenging part of the work we all did together. And you've heard me say this before. The chancellor challenged us early on to think about values and how we communicate them as crisply as possible, that we would be able to paint the words of our values on the side of a wall. And that was challenging to those of us who were used to writing in values in a paragraph. But in the end, I think we achieved it. And we have our 8 values here on the slide. If the old saw about the values of an organization being reflective of its soul holds any truth, then I believe these 8 are a pretty good soul to have and reflect back to our students and stakeholders. Next slide. Now, I'm not going to spend much time on this slide because, again, the chancellor has already touched on a number of these challenges. And we spent a lot of time in the retreat in the fall going into detail with data on these challenges. But what I will say here is, frankly, none of us are seeing any of these challenges abate. They are, if anything, growing and bearing down on us with increasing speed, which further fuels our sense of urgency. Next slide. Okay, now we move into that transactional part of the strat plan where we talk about priorities and goals. As we engaged in the planning process, looking at both trend and workforce data and considering all the input we gathered through listening sessions, it was interesting, although not very surprising, to see how different groups surfaced different concerns and issues in the planning conversations, and frankly, put different priorities on the various concerns and issues. In the end, after considering a number of groupings and combinations, the work group proposed 5 priority areas shown here: academic excellence and innovation, access, affordability and achievement, workforce and economic development, research, and diversity, equity, inclusion. Of these, diversity, equity, inclusion is regarded as the single area that cuts across all priority areas, with DEI-related goals and strategies woven into each priority area. The next several slides go through some key strategies and goals under each of these priority areas. Our intent here is not to go through comprehensively the entire strategic plan. You all have the longer strategic plan, which lists all our goals, priorities. And I will say that we have started working already on an approach to implementation and an implementation plan. And our goal is to come back to the work group in the fall with an implementation plan that would include milestones, metrics, and the resource requirements needed to achieve them. Next slide. But just to spend a moment on each one of these priority areas, academic excellence and innovation, we recognize that achieving and maintaining academic excellence requires investing in our people, our programs, and our facilities. And so we've picked out these handful of goals underneath that priority. But again, I'll emphasize there are many, many more in the larger document. Now, these are the goals, along with their suggested strategies that represent the areas that we've chosen to focus on in the near term, in the next 3 years. They are goals that build off the programs, policies, and resources that we already have in large part in place. And we know we have to continue executing on those goals, even as we look to how we are going to carve out the time, energy, and effort to plan for what looks like a very different future. And again, our longer term goals are designed to meet those future needs, including, and if we could go to the next slide. So here's a selection of kind of the more aspirational longer term goals. And it's not to say we aren't already working on them, but that we will deliver metrics and progress against them in the next phase of the plan implementation. So for instance, some longer term goals under this priority include piloting new learning pathways. We heard about that several times this morning. But the idea here is a lot of these things are, if you will, pilots right now. And the idea of the strategic plan is we ramp to scale so that we can serve thousands and thousands and thousands of learners. We've been told repeatedly we need to do a better job at telling our story in a compelling way. And in fact, Regent Ganella has been doing double duty because he's also been leading the branding and marketing task force. And so we have as a specific goal, the improvement of how we tell our story in a compelling way to all of our stakeholders. Next slide. I think we're going backward. Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. So priority 2 addresses access, affordability, and achievement. This is about everyone who wants an education. We have a place for them, and we will give them an affordable education that is a high quality education. So in this goal, again, in the near term, we emphasize continuing to improve the transfer pathways, developing innovative education programs around new credentials, and continuing to strengthen the connection between learning experiences that our students engage in and translating that into the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that employers look for to have a successful professional career. Next slide. To me, this is where it starts getting super interesting. We recognize that in transforming and adding to the idea of lifelong learners that are not necessarily degree-seeking learners, we may have to redesign a lot about how we do things, not in place of what we do, but in addition to what we do. So this contemplates redesigning our financial and business models, reaching much more deeply into Maryland's pre-K through 12 pipeline, truly using our regional centers as hubs for innovation and piloting things, and focusing on continuous improvement in student services. Next slide. Next one is on workforce and economic development. We've long recognized that the pipeline of our graduates is critical to powering the state's economy. What we commit to do here is not only maintain our position as the dominant producer of graduates, but to diversify and strengthen the workforce through the production of more underrepresented minority graduates. And you heard a little bit about that this morning. But again, the idea here is to scale those efforts. Next slide. We've already done a lot in the area of entrepreneurship. You heard Dr. Allison this morning, and I'll reference her again later in an item with the Economic Development Committee. We have a team throughout the system that works on building entrepreneurship and company creation. And our idea here is to increase the number of business startups that we are supporting. Next slide. You know, we have always been so strong in research, particularly with federal agencies. We've got 60 federal agencies and 70 federal research labs in Maryland. That gives us a tremendous advantage in research. But it's more than just an academic activity in our state, it's a business. The impact of research and development on Maryland's economy is tremendous. So we seek to expand the impact through goals that will better align our areas of research strength with those of federal agencies, that will grow research partnerships, particularly with industry, and to use the lessons we've learned under Empower, quite frankly, to expand cross-institutional, interdisciplinary, and interprofessional research domestically and internationally. Next slide. We also recognize that our research can solve problems of Maryland and the world. And so this plan emphasizes issues tied to climate change and sustainability, environmental justice, race, identity, and systemic racism as research topics for the future. Next slide. Finally, and importantly, as we've made clear and the board has made clear in its statement and actions, the system is dedicated to promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of our policies, practices, and endeavors. The DEI goals in this plan are purposefully designed to ensure the diversity of our system reflects and supports the diversity of our state. And we'll do this through support of faculty, staff, and students, support for our HBCUs and their unique and invaluable contributions to our state, and support, as I mentioned earlier, for research and scholarship that is designed to identify and attack issues related to inequality, globalization, race, identity, and systemic racism. Next slide. In addition, we will pledge to ensure through our goals laid out in this plan that our graduates are prepared to be fully engaged citizens, aware of and ready to address the issues that challenge our society globally and locally. And with that, we conclude the content portion. Next slide. I mentioned how we're working on the implementation plan. And today is the start of our communications rollout. I want to give enormous thanks and shout out to a couple of individuals in the system, Tim McDonough, Kara McCandless, and the whole marketing communications team, Nan McQueen for her peerless writing ability and ability to sharpen our messages. And I'd also like to give a thanks to President Schatzel and her Towson marketing design team, who stepped in at our hour of need and produced such wonderful, wonderful communication materials. Thank you very much. And with that, I conclude my remarks.
Well, thank you again, Regent Ganella and Vice Chancellor Herbst. At this time, this item is a board action. Do I have a motion to approve the strategic plan? Is there a second? Any discussion before moving forward? Yes.
Quick comment. I think she mentioned that the group that was involved in putting this together, I want to make sure that we continue to keep the grassroots community that we serve, provide them input into this emerging plan. A plan is a living document. I want to make sure that we have the communities having a pathway to provide input moving forward.
Yeah, there was something unique about this plan that Ellen and Jeff both noted. The plan was up on the website so that we could collect input. And as they work through the implementation plan, they plan to put that out as well so that they can get the broadest form of input from anyone who wants to comment on the plan. Excellent point, though, Regent Wallace. Other comments?
Yes, just a comment. I think we owe a great deal of gratitude to Regent Ganella and Ms. Hurst for their tremendous work in putting this plan together. It was really a lot of work and effort on a long period of time. And also just to emphasize that this is a document on paper, and that I've seen a lot of plans that simply remain on paper on the shelves. And it is left up to us and the entire leadership team to make sure that we actually execute this. Because we, as indicated in the plan, you want something that is aspirational and visionary, but also operational in the sense that we can put something behind it to make sure that we carry through over the next few years what people have worked so hard over the last few years to put together.
All good points. And Regent Gill?
Yeah, Ellen and Jeff and team, fabulous job. The one thing that I would like, and there were some references, but the connectivity between USM and I'm thinking K through 12, I'm especially thinking, well, all through K through 12, the connectivity. Because I don't know the latest number, I'm sure it's north of 80%. All of our USM students are Maryland residents. It's a big number. And the trajectory academically of our K through 12 is going the wrong way. So the connectivity really is almost on two levels. One is, how can we engage ourselves to us, besides teacher education, et cetera? How can we engage ourselves more hands-on with K through 12, both in terms of from an academic perspective and from a mentoring relationship perspective? Because we're going the wrong way, K through 12, across the board in the state of Maryland. And our future is K through 12 in the state of Maryland. And it'll arrive very quickly. So the sooner we can engage, really engage, the better.
And Ellen and Jeff, I know you're taking notes. And as they work through the implementation plan, Mike, they will put special emphasis on that.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
He's absolutely right. And I know we are doing a lot right now, all of the campuses, being able to document that, show the state what we're doing, and then work
piece of that, though, is that there are millions of students, of adults, who have never graduated.
Yeah.
And we're beginning to do that, to bring them back. That's the other part. So being able to document what we're doing and finding ways of building synergy will be great.
Yes. Anyone else? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. We'll now move on to the report of the councils, and we'll begin with Ms. Harper. Oh, we're going to begin with our very own Ms. Beam.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
I'm stepping in for Miss Harper this morning because I've had the pleasure of working with her throughout the year. And Tola and I both have been at all of the USMSC council meetings, and it's been a real joy to learn from her. So it's fitting that on both of our kind of last days at a full board meeting that I get to speak for her, but I am missing her today. So Ms. Harper, first I'll bring her thanks and everything, and then we'll get into some of the details of the student council's work. Oh, sure. Yeah, can you all hear me a little bit better? Great, thank you. So Ms. Harper wanted to say that it's been an honor to be the president of the University System Student Council, and she wanted to express her gratitude and her thanks to the entire university system, the presidents, and the Board of Regents. She says, genuinely, I believe that the university system is a treasure filled with greatness. And she's proud to continue her studies within the system and excited for the future of all of the faculty, staff, and students. Over the last year on the student council, we focused on trying to build community and really rebuild community during a time when things have been constantly in flux and when students have been really craving that. And this was a challenge in all settings, but especially in a virtual setting for us to connect with other student leaders, to connect with representatives. So building community was a major focus for us on the University System Student Council. And Ms. Harper really worked to amplify all of the different voices on the council and to get representation from the different schools so that both undergraduates and graduate students were adequately represented and their concerns were voiced. Another thing that I really want to highlight that I have sincerely felt as a student on the board is that we're here, as Ms. Harper says, to work for the greater good of one another. I kind of want to let that sink in. Also, that you all have shown me how committed you are to the student experience and to learner outcomes. And I think maybe not all students know that, who aren't in leadership positions and who don't have the privilege of serving like Ms. Harper, Tola, and I all do in these positions. So Ms. Harper led with the motto of enjoy the journey, because no matter what happens, we must learn to navigate challenge and grow through adversity, which we've all seen throughout this year. And I think she really lived out in her term as president. And then the other thing that we wanted to circle back to that we've talked a lot about this year, both on the board as well as in the student council, is mental health. And we recognize, of course, that this is a national issue, that we have a shortage of mental health professionals, and that it is not necessarily a choice to not have our students be getting seen by professionals, but that we have to be able to do more regardless of that. And I think that really requires a shift in culture and a shift in mindset of faculty and staff, because Ms. Harper and I have both struggled, I know even Tola has, with our own personal issues, with having deaths in the family, deaths in our personal circles, and faculty and staff are not always receptive to that. I know I've received, following the death of a close family member and then the death of a friend, punctuationless emails from faculty, and no regards really for our well-being outside of our role as students. And this is an issue that students face really across the board, both at undergraduate and graduate level. And so beyond addressing the need for mental health professionals, which is a national issue, we also need to refocus and consider what can we do to address the mindset of faculty and staff and to help change the culture and build trust between faculty and staff and students so that when a student comes with a concern, it's a valid concern and the faculty and staff trust that that is not coming from a place of trying to get out of an assignment, but that's coming from a place of real vulnerability and need. And that us as students, especially as student leaders, but everyone really wants to show up. You know, we want to show up, we want to maximize this degree, this opportunity, the opportunities that we have as students here today. And so I just I wanted to circle back on that issue, but I also wanted to reiterate my faith in USM's ability to do this and their ability to make this shift because of the experiences that I've touched on as student region. And I think if we can just communicate that faith and that commitment to every student more clearly, then we're going to see a tremendous shift and a positive change in energy among the average student. And so to wrap up, I wanted to look to the next year, which you can read more about in the report, but following the 2023 elections, which were our final board meeting for the year, we have elected Arsalan Siddiqui of the University of Maryland, College Park as president, re-elected Emily Madison of Salisbury University as vice president of graduate affairs, along with Vinavie Gambier of the University of Maryland, College Park as vice president of undergraduate affairs. And so those are some of the names and faces that you will be seeing around in the coming years. And I want to thank you all both for the opportunity to serve as student regent, but on behalf of Ms. Harper as well, she wanted to thank you all for the opportunity to serve the University System of Maryland. Both of us are forever grateful and have had a tremendous, tremendous positive experience working with you all. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Regent Beam? Okay, Tola.
Sorry, they're working. Okay. I didn't know if I would have an opportunity to do it later, but I just wanted to express how much of an honor it's been working with Ada. And it's sad that Yvonne couldn't be here today, but working with her as well on the student council has been the greatest of pleasures for me. I'm sure we all understood that with the challenges of the year, it's been an unprecedented experience, student regents, coming out of the pandemic and all the challenges that we faced and the discussions coming out of that. And I just wanted to congratulate Ada as well, because you've carried yourself very well, being that you are serving as a voting regent without having that first year of experience that most student regents have had prior. So congratulations to you, and I hope to see you even after our experience here. So it's worthy of applause. So applause for Ada, please.
Thank you, Tola. And now we'll go on to the Council University System Faculty Report by Dr. Brune.
Good morning, everyone. I'm walking very slow today because after this strategic plan report, I'm feeling a whole lot of heaviness on all the things that we have to do in the next few years. Before I begin my oral report, I would like to say a few words about my successor, CUSIF Chair-elect, Dr. Holly Brewer. Unfortunately, she cannot be here with us today, but I'm sure you will find her a strong CUSIF spokesperson. Dr. Brewer is the Burke Professor of American History and Associate Professor of the University of Maryland. She is a specialist in early American history, the early British Empire, as well as early modern debates about justice. So she can bring a historical perspective for us. While new to CUSIF, Dr. Brewer is very active on our Legislative Affairs Committee and seeks to have CUSIF to be more active in legislative concerns, as well as shared governance. As I said before, I think you will find her an authentic and strong CUSIF leader. I have two major topics to bring to your attention this morning. You have my written report, most of which deals with the shared governance, but when we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But first, I'd like to be pleased to announce, because this is near and dear to my heart, that the initial draft of the Academic Integrity Work Group, both policy and guidelines, were unanimously passed by the membership of CUSIF at our May meeting. The policy seeks to promote within USM the success of its educational mission through a commitment to adhere to clearly established principles of academic integrity. This policy provides practices designed to instill and support across the university system a culture of teaching and learning with integrity, and to hold all members of the community to the highest standards of academic conduct. While this approval is the first step in the approval process, I have great hope that with administrative and student support, the draft will find its way to the Regents in the fall. So please look forward for that. Now, let's talk about shared governance. In October of last year, CUSF hosted Dr. Stephen Balls, president of Augusta College, at our Faculty Senate Chairs meeting. President Balls worked with the Association of Governing Boards, and in particular, his published work, How to Make Shared Governance Work, Some Best Practices, provided a springboard for conversation on the question, what does shared governance work, or does shared governance work for you on your campuses? It also began conversations that were later had at CUSF with President Bro. CUSF was given permission to adopt portions of Dr. Ball's AGB work for this year's survey tool. The focus of this survey was on faculty's impressions and perceptions of campus shared governance effectiveness. The survey was formatted to look at USM faculty perceptions in 5 categories. General overall impressions of campus shared governance effectiveness. In other words, is it effective? Communication, transparency and respect, boundaries and faculty governance of academic programs, other areas of decision-making, and general questions, miscellaneous important questions like, and I'll talk about them a little bit more, the idea of what is your idea of shared governance? What's the best, what have you seen, or have you seen any? The whole survey is, and general impressions in particular, are based on 4 types of shared governance that are spelled out. Shared governance as equal say, meaning faculty, staff, and administration have equal say in all matters. Shared governance as to the obligation to consult. In other words, faculty the administration comes to faculty in an effort to say, okay, this is what we've done, or do you agree or disagree, kind of situation. Shared governance is set as a rules of engagement. Shared governance is about various roles of authority, administration, and staff, and such things as academic decisions, budget decisions, selection of president, and other decisions. And it spells out how to handle disagreements. And then the final format of shared governance design is shared governance is a system of open communication with the goal of aligning priorities to create shared responsibility for the institution. It's a system of open communication, creates a culture of shared responsibility for the welfare of the institution, and it creates a system of checks and balances to ensure the institution stays mission-centered and maintain focus on these systems' strategic goals. To figure out what faculty perceived, which type of governance they had, 2 questions were asked. Would you best describe, of these 4, which one do you best think you have right now on your campus? And then if you don't have one you like, which one would you prefer of these 4? The results are pretty interesting. 68% of our faculty respondents felt they were only had and obligated to share or consult. They did not perceive that they were actively involved in what was going on. The most popular shared governance type faculty would like to have, both their first and second choice, and a significantly large number, was the shared governance as a system of open communication with the goal of aligning priorities to share responsibility for the institution. all of this was given open comment. So faculty came in, if they wanted to explain their results, they came in and they said that they see improvement towards open communication. Things are happening on our campuses that are moving forward, but there's still a whole lot of work to go, and they really want to get out of that idea that you're just coming to ask us if it's okay. They want more input. We've talked about this before. This is not news, okay? And it goes a long way with what our student, what Ivana said many times, what we've all said many times. Communication is the key, but it's just more than communication. It's being transparent, it's getting input, it's getting feedback. So the major themes from all these other areas, communication, transparency, trust, respect, the roles and responsibilities of decision-making, here's the highlights that I want you to take away. Faculty think there's this they have mutual respect with administration, but they do not trust administration because of unclear boundaries and roles and responsibilities within the shared governance process. So what does that mean for us? It means we need to get other people, maybe outside people, and Dr. Groh and I have talked about this, outside information, maybe even Dr. Balls will come in and talk to us about it. How can we make those lines? How can we set those roles and responsibilities and make them clearly understood by everyone? Faculty believe all stakeholders should be included appropriately in shared governance improvement and any improvement process suggested with effective implementation as the goal. So while we may come up with these great, wonderful ideas, if they aren't implemented or implemented well, and we don't clearly come back and look at them to see that they were implemented well, we have a problem. Almost all respondents had no clear example of successful shared governance. I find this very interesting. I myself thought about this when I saw that question. I said, gee, have I ever really seen shared governance at work? And I'd have to say, the one example that comes out is COVID. That's the one time when it felt like everybody was working on the same team. Maybe everybody wasn't always sure what was coming out, but they were all in agreement with the number one goal, which is how can we make this place safer for us? How can we still educate our students? And I think that is probably the only successful time I've seen it. Otherwise, it's all about understanding the process. Suggestions for improving trust include informal relationship building activities. You know, when you have the dinner before you come here, and which unfortunately I missed last night because it took me 5 hours to get from Baltimore to here. But I think it's a holiday weekend. But anyway, when you have those activities and you have the opportunity to meet and talk to everyone outside of what you're doing, that makes a big difference. It established relationships. The other suggestions were revising shared government roles and responsibilities in conjunction with strategic planning. So at the same time, every 5 years, or it should be every 3 or 2 years nowadays, but whenever you're going into your strategic planning, look at those roles and responsibilities. Are they changing too? They also suggest that there's a better understanding of what shared governance is among faculty, not just leadership. This goes back to what your point was earlier. If I were to be honest with all of you, if I were to go to some of my peers, 90% of them wouldn't really know what the USM was. Now, I constantly come back and talk to them about it, but that's the people that I have communication with. It's not the entire UMGC faculty. You know, this is the point. It's like when you have an election for any federal or state position, people don't even understand They're electing somebody to be your spokesperson. So faculty sometimes feel, I should have a vote in this. You should be listening to me. They forget they elected people to speak for them. So they're not connecting with them. And the message isn't getting out there. So these are important things that we have to do when we talk about being leaders. We need to really focus about that. And when we do talk about shared governance, the process has to be understood by everybody, and they also need to understand what their shared governance is about on their campuses. So I really urge, if you haven't already done so, read the PowerPoint that's associated with this. It will go in and highlight to you a lot of the very important thoughts and feelings that are there, and they are perceptions. It's not that they, everybody voted this way, their perception. And I think it will provide a tremendous benchmarks, I've said this before, for our discussion with the President's Council next year. I think it's a positive thing that we have and a great tool. So in that closing, I would just want to thank the Regents, Chancellor, Presidents, Vice Chancellor Boffman, Dr. Lee, and USM staff that I've worked with, my fellow CUSIV members, for their support and the work that they have given me in my 2 years as chair. Actually 2.5 if you don't count the half time we spent with COVID. I will be returning next year as CUSIV XCOM past chair to help with any transition. And our new team, Dr. Holly Brewer, as I mentioned, from UMD, Dr. Heather Haverbeck from Towson, Dr. Lorinda Naylor from the UBalt, Dr. Erica Kennedy from Frostburg, and Atmos Sahu from Coppin. Anybody have any questions?
Well, thank you, Dr. Brune, and thank you for the informative report. I sat in on some of the early academic integrity sessions, and so you've come a long way.
It's been a long journey,
Yes.
but we got there. We're almost there. Everybody's going to make it happen, right?
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much for everything.
Now we'll have the Council of University System Staff, Dr. Shoshana.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Hello. Oh, yay. That was nice. We like that. So I am very excited to be here at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore today to share my last report as the chair of the Council of University System Staff. In hearing the other reports from the Student and the Faculty Council, I will say up front, we are a little behind on CUS. We do not have a year-end report because we continue to meet through the summer. We haven't done elections. I'll talk about some of those pieces and what that transition is going to look like. But we will be wrapping things up within the next month or two and transitioning as a council as well, which will be a very substantial transition for us as we have had the same executive committee for the last 3 years, including myself as chair and our other positions aside from our member at large position, which has changed. So it will be definitely a shift for us in leadership and having some new folks coming in, but I'll share a few updates about that in a moment. I did just want to say that it has very much been an experience unlike any other, serving as the chair of CUS for the last 3 years. Little did I know when I transitioned into this role that we would be facing a global pandemic and all of the other things that are happening at our campuses in our society right now. But it has really been an honor to be in this role and to feel so supported by the board, by the chancellor, by the presidents. And I would definitely echo what our student speaker and Elizabeth said in terms of just feeling like we have an amazing group of leaders here. And sometimes I think our constituents that are a little further removed from the leadership table don't always see that, right? They see the struggles, they see the challenges, but to be here and to get to know this group, I feel very comfortable going back to our staff and saying that the folks at the system level have the best interest of staff at heart, and that we're doing everything we can to support all of our constituent groups in a very wonderful way. Of course, there's always room for growth, and I'll talk about that a little bit with our shared governance report as well. So I want to share a few logistical things. One, we will meet next Tuesday. That'll be our June meeting. We will be hosted by Bowie State virtually, so we're very excited for that. And that is really where we will tie up all of our loose ends for this cycle. So our committees, which we did slightly different committees this year for the first time, awards and outreach, legislative affairs and policy, and staff resources and special projects, will be meeting for a final time and working on year-end reports to share what they've accomplished for this cycle. So we might open next year with some recaps of what we've done this past year and what we're looking forward to in 22-23. My favorite part of those reports, though, is that we have them say what they think the next group should focus on for the upcoming cycle. And they help us decide who should be leading those committees for the next year. So we put it on the current chairs to decide if they want to come back or let us know who would be a great next leader for each of those standing committees. Our executive committee will do the same, especially since we're facing such a substantial transition. We will kind of recap the last several years and help prepare our next executive committee to take on leadership of CUS. We will have elections at that meeting. I'm excited to share that we have our vice chair, Kalia Patricio from the University of Maryland College Park is running for chair. She was finishing her doctorate in the last cycle, so that was a big part of why I stayed on as chair, so that she could finish that degree. But now that she is Dr. Patricio, she is ready to step into the role of chair. I highly doubt that anybody will be running against her, so I feel assured letting this group know that she will probably be the next leader of CUS, and I will transition into my role as past chair. And then the other thing that I wanted to add about our executive committees, for the first time in this cycle, we have a very robust number of folks running for vice chair and co-secretary roles, and I anticipate we'll have the same for our member-at-large positions. And I think a huge part of that is that we've spent the last 3 years and navigating everything with the pandemic, trying to figure out how to distribute the workload of our executive committee in a more fair way and getting people excited to be involved in those leadership opportunities. So it used to be that the role was very heavy on the chair. And so I've done, in true delegation style, I have tried to spread out all of the pieces of what we do so that each person knows what they're responsible for, what the role is going to look like, and really getting people excited to take on this work, right? I mean, this is above and beyond our jobs as staff. We don't get course release, but I will share we do feel supported in doing these roles. But just thinking about the time commitment and being very clear with people what these roles entail so that they feel comfortable transitioning into these leadership positions. So we have a number of folks running for vice chair and co-secretary. We'll have, I think, maybe in the time I've been involved with CUS, our first ever somewhat more competitive election. So we like that. And we have plenty of other leadership roles for folks that run that don't get elected. So we will make sure that those folks have plenty to do, even if they're not selected for those positions. And then the last thing I want to share that's important for this group to know is that we are in the process of setting our meeting schedule for the upcoming cycles. We will vote on that at our meeting next week as well. So I will share back with folks from the board, from the university system, with the chancellor and with the presidents as soon as we know our meeting schedule for the upcoming year. We are actually voting on a 12-year meeting schedule because I have slight OCD problems with planning, but we'll have a longer term plan in terms of what our meetings will look like. And then we'll definitely share out the next year or two schedule once we have it. In my mind, there were 12 campuses, so planning 12 years totally made sense. Sometimes I don't know, but, and then the last part of this that's logistical is we will also be having an in-person year-end meeting next Friday. There is not a super formal agenda for this. We are going to be outside. There will be food. It is just a really nice chance for our council to get together in person. And we'll be kind of deciding at that point how we would like our meetings to look for the upcoming cycle, whether they'll remain virtual, hybrid, in person, whatever that looks like. But I just really wanted a chance for us to actually see each other. We have not seen each other in 2 years. The last time CUS met in person was February 2020. For Advocacy Day. And so there are members on the council that I have never met in person. I'm just very excited to bring folks together and actually see people's faces. So thank you to the system for helping us pull that off. And also UMBC will be hosting. So we appreciate having the space and having that chance to bring folks together. I think those are my main logistical updates. I want to share a few highlights from our shared governance survey as well. I would echo a lot of what Elizabeth said in terms of our next steps are similar to what we heard from the staff. So for our shared governance survey, which is modeled after the CUSIF survey, we had 124 responses from all 12 of the system campuses. Of course, in full transparency, we do have some campuses that have a very high response rate and some that have less, but the folks taking this survey are only those involved in shared governance. So this also kind of makes sense. Smaller campuses maybe have smaller senates, may have less folks involved in this work. But we do really try to make sure that we are reaching out to folks at each of the campuses to get at least some response to the survey from each institution. We have shared our full report with the chancellor and individual reports with each of the presidents. And so I give a very high level recap to this group just because I know that those results are in good hands with Chancellor Perman and the presidents in terms of following up with the shared governance groups about what you're seeing for each of your institutions. So our survey focused on 4 categories: communication, similar to CUSIF, the roles of different stakeholders, the presidents, those involved in shared governance, and leadership at each of the institutions, how joint decision-making happens, and then also the structure of shared governance. This is something within CUS that we are really trying to get a handle on because our shared governance groups look a little different than some of the other campuses. So whether we have exempt staff, non-exempt staff, folks that are represented by collective bargaining that are not involved in the council, but just thinking about all the different ways that staff are represented and what that structure looks like. Are people elected? Are they appointed? Do they just choose to do it? It looks very different at each institution. So a few little highlights from this survey, and again, I will not reiterate some of the parts of what Elizabeth already highlighted, but I think some very positive pieces of this are that through the pandemic, staff felt like they were still able to be active and engaged in shared governance, which is phenomenal. In fact, I think for us as staff, the pandemic had a silver lining of more people being able to be involved because of the virtual format. So I know with our staff senate at UMBC, we have 18 representatives, but we have had 30 or 40 people on every single one of our staff senate meetings because other folks from campus can join. They feel, like they can hop online and see what's happening with the staff senate. Same thing for CUS. Normally in person, we would have 20 or 30 people. We sometimes have meetings with 40 or 50 of our council representatives and alternates. So I really think us thinking about how we meet and how we make space for this work and what we've learned from the pandemic is helpful. The other thing that was clear across almost all of our institutions is that staff feel supported to do this work. So for us, this really means time, right? It's not necessarily funding. It's not necessarily anything other than my supervisor is going to let me be away from the office 2 or 3 times a month. They know that my work will get done, but I also can be involved in this thing that I'm passionate and I think is very important. So feeling that support to be able to be at the table and to be involved. And then a couple of challenges, and I don't say challenges, I just say areas of growth, because I do think that we do this work really well, but the areas of growth continue to be, echoing some of what Elizabeth said, around communication. So definitely impacted by the pandemic, but thinking about how we get back to pre-pandemic levels and how we are communicating from all of the tiers that we have within the system, what's happening at each level, and how that's reciprocated, right? So I might take stuff back to my campus, but how am I sharing what's happening at my campus back up and vice versa? So just thinking about how we communicate. And then I think too, the other challenge that staff, and this is not new, continue to face is just feeling like we fully recognize that we have a spot at the table, but having a spot at the table sometimes isn't always enough, right? So how are the voices and concerns of staff really being heard, responded to, being the infrastructure of our campuses and really supporting all constituent groups, right, in a lot of our roles. And so just making sure that we are involved in decision-making, not an afterthought to decision-making, and feeling like, I think we do a great job of recognizing staff, but continuing to do that and making sure we're keeping tuned into what staff need in an ever-evolving workplace and time, and giving folks equal support, time, resources, whatever that looks like, as what we share with our faculty partners and our and our student partners. And similar to what Elizabeth said, just the fact that the pandemic has brought us all so much closer together to see how the other groups work and to make sure that we're doing a lot of that work similarly across the councils and feeling the same amount of support. So I will end by saying too, I am happy to share, I did not include it with my report, but I'm happy to share the full report that came out of our shared governance survey. Our next exec-com will be making some changes to that survey because we've done the same survey for 5 years, and there are some other questions that we really want to ask based on some of what we learned this year. But I am happy to share the full survey if folks are, the full report if folks are interested in seeing that. So I believe those are my main updates for today. I just want to echo again my thanks to Chair Gooden, the board, Chancellor Perman, all of the presidents. It has really been phenomenal to be here. Last month, I was super excited. Last meeting, I was super excited that this was ending. And now I feel like, what am I going to do? But I'm sure this is not the last time I will be around. I'm going to be backing up our our new chair as she transitions from vice chair to chair. So thank you all very much. It has been my honor to serve in this role for the last 3 years. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions for Dr. Shoshana? Well, thank you. We've enjoyed your energy the last 3 years and we'll miss you and your reports. Good luck this summer. We're now, it's time for public comment. As you know, all regularly, You know, the presidents are so far away today, I forgot they were in the room. And so now we'll have the Council of Presidents and Dr. Bro. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me this morning and for our colleagues, and greetings to all of our Regents colleagues and everyone here today. No, I cannot top that energy, that wonderful positive energy of Dr. Shoshana. And I want to, before I give my formal remarks, I would like to acknowledge each of our shared governance leaders for all that they have done and committed during these unprecedented times. I believe they do deserve another round of applause. It has truly been a remarkable time when we look back on everything that has happened here and throughout these last couple of years. I do also want to acknowledge our illustrious President Heidi Anderson for her wonderful, wonderful hospitality today and making sure that we felt welcomed on the Lower Eastern Shore. Congratulations to you for all that you have done here. And also I want to acknowledge and give kudos to you for your experiential learning opportunities. Staying in the conference center last night was wonderful. I want you to know your students are doing an incredible job. So thank you so very much. Please give her a round of applause for all the hospitality. I'm trying to pull up my notes that just went out. While I'm doing that, I do want to also just say thank you once again to each of you for the wonderful acknowledgements of our student. You can only imagine this president on Sunday evening watching the Tony Awards. If I knew how to do the moonwalk, I would have done the moonwalk because it was just that exciting. It was truly a wonderful time, and I will share your remarks and your acknowledgements with Miles Frost and his family, and also with the faculty in our fine and performing arts area. A lot is owed to them for what they do to support our students on their journey to success. So thank you all for those compliments. I also want to congratulate everyone who worked on the strategic plan, Regent Ganella, Ellen Herbst, and everyone who worked on the work planning group for that outstanding achievement and the final product. The strategic plan, I agree with our Regents, it is a work in progress. It never sits up on a shelf, and know that the Council of University System Presidents looks at it that way. We look forward to the implementation and contributing to the next 10 years of implementation. Some of us will not be on board in 10 years, and I do want to take a moment out to once again give recognition to President White, President Frabowski, for your contributions to your campuses, to the Council of University System Presidents, and to all the lives you have touched along the way. We wish you well, and we hope you will continue to stay in touch with each of us We've enjoyed working with you, and on behalf of CUSP, once again, I want to say thank you. Please give them a round of applause. CUSP met twice since our last time that we were with the Regents. We met on May 2nd and June 6th. The May 2nd meeting included a presentation from Tom Reifert, the Assistant Secretary of Commerce, on the Maryland Marketing Partnership. Vice Chancellor Herbst presented proposed revisions to Policy 9.2.10, Policy on Affiliated Philanthropic Foundations, and President Fowler closed the meeting with a discussion regarding the UMGC partnerships. The June 6th meeting had a full agenda. We reviewed 3 policies: policy on student classification for admission and tuition purposes, the policy on student tuition fees and charges, and the policy on associates of the chancellor and presidents. The meeting ended with a discussion of shared governance and how best to maximize the interactions of the shared governance councils. And the June 6th meeting was the last CUSP meeting for President Purbowski and White, and we recognized them at that time. I also want to add to my formal written remarks and just let everyone here know the CUSP and my colleagues, we take shared governance seriously. And we are really excited and looking forward to this next year. Was noted earlier, we have made a great deal of progress on shared governance. We've kept it on our agenda. We've discussed it. Know that each campus president meets with the chancellor each year to review shared governance. So there's a lot happening. And I really want to thank Dr. Bruin for those wonderful conversations that we've had and the collaboration that you put forward to let us know, as you heard here today, what are the issues that we still need to work on as we continue to make progress. Like the strategic plan, shared governance is a work in progress. It will always be, but know that we are always working towards excellence. And as we've said here with strategic planning, preeminence. So with that, I want to wish all the fathers in the room a happy Father's Day. And finally, happy Juneteenth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bro. Are there any questions for Dr. Bro? Okay, seeing none, it is now time for public comment. As you know, all regularly scheduled meetings of the Board of Regents will include a period for public comment. We set aside 15 minutes for this purpose. Each speaker has a total of 3 minutes to state their purpose. Do we have someone who wants to speak during this period? Okay.
Good morning. My name is Todd Holden. I work as a web developer at the University of Maryland College Park. I am the president of AFSCME Local 1072. Our union represents a majority of eligible bargaining unit staff at the USM. I am here to comment on a few items of the agenda on behalf of all of our union's locals. First on your agenda, you are asked to approve the new strategic plan. This plan includes the noble goals of justice, equity, fighting systemic racism, and supporting the HBCUs that this system historically neglected. It also touts having been created with the input of internal and external stakeholders. The curious thing about this plan, though, is that no union or civil rights organizations were participants. How do you have a legitimate and inclusive plan if you lock out the majority of rank and file staff who operate your system? How do you initially exclude civil rights organizations like my brothers and sisters in the NAACP who are in attendance today, CASA, the Urban League, CATA, or any number of others, where it would have been reflective of what Marylanders actually want or need? If you want to implement this plan, you will need us and our allies. Secondly, there are 2 items from the Finance Committee on the consent agenda that directly affect our members relating to salary structures and addressing wage compression. AFSCME changed the collective bargaining laws last year to force the USM to actually bargain with us on wages, hours, working conditions, after you collectively had avoided these obligations for years. We asked to bargain on behalf of all of our units on wage compression and salary changes last November. The fact of the matter is that your team abandoned bargaining and walked away from negotiations. Furthermore, this body refused to bargain over any wage issues involving our exempt units, despite the fact that the implications of wage compression between hourly and salaried workers are intertwined, and that wage compression for exempts is a real and serious issue. This unilateral action is the definition of bad faith bargaining. As the fiduciaries in charge of the USM, we want to make clear to you what is happening. And while it may be business as usual, it is unacceptable. AFSCME is prepared to meet and bargain with the USM and the Regents on July 6th. We hope members of this committee will take us up on this offer and meet with our committee so that we may finally move forward in an accountable and transparent fashion. That would indeed be one small step towards preeminence. Thank you.
Todd, I want to thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with the board, and we certainly appreciate your input. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Wayne Gerald. I am the executive director of Hawks of Football. I first stepped foot on this campus in 1962 and became a student in 66. And since then, more than 20 of my family members have been a part of this. Because this is a public meeting and my time is brief, I'll get right to the point. There are those of us who are familiar with UMES, and particularly since the departure of our beloved Dr. William P. Heitch. I am standing before you today to say to you that there are those of us that believe that the Board of Regents and the Chancellor has no intent on making UMES whole, particularly in light of the previous lawsuit that was settled last spring. Since Dr. Height's departure, we've had 7 presidents here. The president that was the most productive contract was not renewed. We've had 2 presidents since that, based on what we've seen, does not or have not moved this university in the direction which we believe the Board of Regents should have it to go. We are concerned that you, the Board of Regents, have not put in place an executive plan to manage your chancellor, who makes pennies less than $1 million, to make sure that UMES is whole again. I appreciate what you've done. We have a lot of faith in you, but we have a history here. There are several documents. One, both Dr. Bell received before her termination. There's another document floating around right now. We need transparency, and we are looking for you guys to do your job. Thank you very much for having me.
Mr. Gerald, thank you for taking time to share your thoughts. And again, we appreciate your input. Now we will move on to the consent agenda, and which is the next order of business. Decisions regarding which items to include on the consent agenda were made by me and the committee chairs. However, any regent may request that an item be removed from the consent agenda for separate review and discussion. Before I move approval of the consent agenda, I ask if there are any items that any regent would like removed from the consent agenda for separate review and discussion.
Madam Chair, I don't want to remove an item. I just would like to note for the record that although I will be voting for the consent agenda, I am abstaining from item 11 on the Finance Committee agenda related to Acme paper.
That will be recorded in the minutes. I move approval of all items on the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Hearing none, the motion passes. Our next order of business is the committee reports. Today we'll hear reports from Regent Atman and the Finance Committee, Regent Leggett and the Committee on Economic Development and Technology Commercialization, and Regent Gordine and the Committee on Education Policy and Student Life. We also have a number of items on the Committee of the Whole. And so we'll begin with Regent Atman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Again, it's great to be here at UMES, and thank you for your hospitality, Madam President. The item that we removed from the consent agenda and wanted to discuss in public session relates to UMBC's lease of real property to the Maryland Department of Health. I'm sure everyone has heard, and if you haven't, I will inform you that about this very exciting news that after many decades of working on this project, President Rabowski, with an assist from Regent Neal, has achieved his goal of having the Spring Grove Hospital transferred to UMBC. And that transaction has occurred. The Board of Public Works approved this transfer in May. And the transfer took place for consideration of $1. The item before us is to request approval of a leaseback to the Maryland Department of Health of this property. So UMBC, which is now the owner, would lease the property to the Maryland Department of Health for an initial term of 10 years with 2 5-year renewal options. Now, the consideration for this lease is $1 per year, but it's a 10-year lease. So actually, we're leasing it for 10 times what we bought it for. Not a bad deal. The department will continue operations at Spring Grove during this time. UMBC will be updating its master plan to provide the framework for the university's exciting long-range plans for the property. The property will be used in a manner consistent with the university's teaching, research, and public service mission. So I would like to, again, congratulate UMBC on the transaction. And I'd like to move for the approval of this matter. Is there a second? Any discussion? Mr. President, you want to say anything?
We're delighted. 30 years coming.
Great. All right, the motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Thank you.
All right. Regent Leggett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a little bit of early discussion from Regent Admin about this matter, and I want to thank him and his committee as well. You may recall some time ago, we had a very robust discussion about the Momentum Fund, which would provide an additional $6 million in the next 3 years to continue that program at a level that we think is consistent with some of the demands that we have and to spur additional economic development that affiliated with the University of Maryland system in our institutions. This is a component part of that. We pull from the consent agenda, whereby we're providing $200,000 per year for the next 3 years as a pilot project, a pilot that is to look beyond what we've done in the Momentum Fund for an earlier stage entrepreneurs so that we can test the feasibility of continuing a program that I think will provide a great deal of promise. As we travel around the state, we've heard and we've seen and we've talked to a number of people about some of the challenges that they face and how we can be of assistance by providing a smaller amount of money than what we traditionally do with the Momentum Fund And I think this will be a very, very good way. We heard earlier, right here, and I was spurred some years ago, I think it was last year, a couple of years ago, by a couple of projects at Salisbury, for which we can in fact provide some assistance. And so this is simply a clear indication for us to take action to demonstrate what we've talked about earlier. It will really spur on, and I think, a very strong entrepreneur projects that I believe will help us in the long term. So this is now up for consideration. And if there's a motion to the effect, the chairman, approve it.
Second.
So moved.
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you, Regent Leggett. Regent Gordine.
I'm not sure the mic, all right, there we go. Good morning, everyone. During the Education Policy and Student Life Committee meeting on May 10th, we received proposed amendments to the USM's policy on undergraduate admissions. As described in your materials, there are two major amendments and a series of smaller edits necessary for accuracy and clarity. I asked to remove this topic from the consent agenda because of the discussion we had about one of those amendments, which was the suggestion to remove the system-wide requirement for all first-year incoming students to submit a score on a nationally standardized examination such as the SAT or the ACT, thus allowing the submission of those scores for admission to be optional at system institutions. I'll offer a little context, and then I'm going to ask Dr. Joe Baughman to share more details. About a year ago, UMES requested permanent exemption from the portion of the policy on undergraduate admissions that requires an ACT or SAT score for first-year students applying for admission. At that time, all USM institutions, as well as most in the nation, were test optional due to the pandemic. When UMES asked for this change to be permanent, the committee put that specific request on hold, but began discussing the national movement to test optional admissions and the possibility of permanent test optional status for all USM institutions. Our institutions, besides Salisbury, which has been test optional for over 10 years, are still operating with that temporary test optional status. So in essence, we've been test optional for about 2 years now. Upon the committee's request, Dr. Baughman and her team in the Office of Academic and Student Affairs convened a work group of provosts and institutional admission representatives to consider the ACT-SAT test requirement. In addition to the proposed amendments being supported by the work group, Dr. Baughman and her team socialized and vetted the proposed amendments broadly. This included USM's presidents, provosts, vice presidents for student affairs, enrollment management and admissions executives, diversity and inclusion council, USM student council, and the Council of University System Faculty. Although the committee did vote to approve the amendments and ultimately support outweighed concerns, there was enough discussion during our meeting and there were enough questions raised that we wanted to set aside time to share and discuss today. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Baughman to provide a little bit more detail before we open it up for conversation.
Thank you very much, Regent Gordine. I would like to remind you that what we're suggesting here is that the USM overarching policy be changed to be merely permissive to each campus, and that each campus would be expected to, in fact, clarify their position on being test optional or test required, and would clearly articulate in their campus policies and all of their processes so that the students who are applying to that institution would clearly understand what would be expected of them. 2 or 3 things here. First of all, as Regent Gordine pointed out, there are more than 1,800 universities across the United States that are now have become standardized test optional. The use of standardized tests by our admissions offices for years have been in advancing the understanding and comparison of students, no matter what high school they may have come from. So it is a standard bearer of sorts. I would remind you, though, that this is applicable only for students coming straight out of high school or within 3 years of high school, that the test score would be applied. Our policy has always been optional for or not requiring tests of other students. And I would remind all of you that our student population is shifting, so that in fact that traditional student coming straight out of high school no longer represents the majority of our students. Studies have shown that these standardized tests do have some cultural bias to them, and that is of concern to us. And we have noticed that in fact, we believe that there are at least many cases where this has been a deterrent or a barrier for some of the very students in underserved populations that we are anxious to in fact bring into our institutions. We have found over the years that the grade point average, the GPA in high school and or in community college, is one of the best predictors for our student success. And I would remind you that since 80% or more of our students are actually Maryland-based, our institutions and their admissions offices know the high schools well. And in fact, they are pretty good at understanding what the GPA from high school A versus high school B or C might mean. That being said, there is a concern, and we are watching this carefully, that grade inflation in high school is an issue. So that in fact, we have challenged our admissions offices to be very careful in watching the GPAs as they are coming out of high school and if there are any shifts in that. More students are coming to us also through dual enrollment. So we have another measure of student success and achievement and ability to work at the college level. And so we're going to be depending more and more on that. We would like to reiterate that we did suspend the test requirements for all of our campuses due to the pandemic because simply the standardized tests were not being given. I would also suggest that one of the deterrents that some of our students have is that the very students that we want to have are not able to afford to take some of the test preparation courses. And therefore, there is another differential here that our students or our applicants may be finding. Our admissions offices are comprehensive offices. They do not merely look at 1 or 2 or 3 scores that a student has. For example, College Park has 26 indicators in their process of admission, the SAT or ACT being only one of those 26 variables. So at this point in time, we believe, as did the work group and the conversations that we've had, that the time has come for the USM to move the USM basic policy to test optional and permit our campuses to declare their preferences to being test optional or not test optional. And I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I'm not sure whether any of the presidents might also like to make a comment.
Darrell?
All right, good morning. Can you hear me?
Morning.
Okay, so I just want to say that, you know, because of the pandemic, all of us have went test optional. And what we don't know in all of our institutions is what the actual data suggests, because it's been cloudy. And I say that from the perspective that, you know, high school students were virtual for almost 1.5 years. They did not take examinations, and they came into our institutions, and we're still assessing their progress through our institutions. So at College Park, as Vice Chancellor Boffin mentioned, we use 25 other factors that are in the admissions process that have served us well over the years. And one of the most important factors is the fact that we understand the high school systems in the state of Maryland, and that a GPA is a better measure from a given high school of your success at our institutions, not the ACT or the SAT. So we are asking for additional time, and we decided to communicate to our future students that we're extending the test optional to 2027 so that we can understand the data post the pandemic as to how well students are doing. Now, I also want to state that the University of California system has decided to go test optional for a long period of time because they have already found that their data, that ACT and SAT does not affect their admissions to all of their University of California system schools. So that's a really large system that we compare often to. To provide background to the Regents, they understand that a large system of high quality have decided to go test optional. Finally, I wanted to say that, remember, this is a business. Students have been taking these tests for years. As Vice Chancellor Baughman has alluded to, that persons of color tend to have biases against them by these tests, and they don't get into schools. And so this has been known historically that it's not a good measure for admission into universities. And that's why we have 25 other measures at College Park. But I think it's going to really show a lot of good data over the next 3 to 5 years for our system to see what is the best approach to go. So being cautious is a good idea. But the majority of institutions have not seen any negative aspect for the last 2 years during this pandemic. So I just wanted you all to know that as background.
Yes, Freeman.
I agree completely. Our president from College Park is a wise man. It's well said. The one thing I want us to think about, and we're the same way, we're saying test optional too. I will say this, that particularly for students of color, we have to find ways, and students in general, first generation college students, of helping them to have the skills they need to succeed on standardized tests though, because when you think about medical school or law school or the CPA or the nursing exam or the teacher's exam, all of these are standardized tests. So I think I'm agreeing completely with Darryl about the test optional, but from the academic perspective and the future of our students, we have to send the message. We've got to learn these skills, particularly reading skills. As a math of reading skills on all these tests. And so I think our institutions need to keep looking at ways. We started, Dr. Anderson, by talking about the teacher's exam, about preparing teachers. We're gonna have to keep working on building those skills while allowing students to come into our institutions.
Yes, Dr. White.
Thank you. At Salisbury, it's been noted that we've been using test optional admissions for about 15 years now. We have a lot of experience with it. I do believe that due to the cultural bias of the standardized tests, that these do introduce inequities into college admissions. And that's why we are pleased to have a lot of experience in conducting admissions with standardized tests being optional. I think it can work well, and we encourage the system to adopt this posture.
Anyone else have comments or discussion?
Ma'am.
Andy?
Thank you. First, I want to thank the chair and the chair of the committee, Gordine and Joe, for entertaining all of the questions I had during committee time and even afterward. You and I had a conversation, so I really appreciate that. So I raised a number of somewhere between questions and objections to this. So if you don't mind, if we could just have a little back and forth to either convince me or just to clarify for the group some of these issues that I find most concerning. Number one on my list is that this could actually set back some of our efforts to advance opportunity. So there are many measures that admissions offices use that have biases in a number of ways. Letters of recommendation, high profile internships, opportunities to take part in all types of extracurricular activities. More advantaged students have more chances to do a lot of those things. One of the benefits of a test like the SAT or ACT is that it can help identify false negatives. Students who the other metrics say probably aren't ready, but these students, because a lot of other things were aligned against them, didn't have that great of a GPA, didn't have a chance to do a whole lot of other things. But thanks to this test, we see that this student is off the charts in reading, off the charts in math. So there is some data on this. So we're not talking about 10 students, 20 students. We're probably talking nationwide, hundreds of thousands of students who, when they take this test, their application is strengthened by taking the SAT. So admitting their disadvantage, admitting that all of the other types of metrics are saying there are no thank goodness for this test because it is identifying some students who ought to be a yes. Now, there's an analog in the K-12 space, which is for years and years there were gifted and talented programs, which disproportionately were taking in more affluent, more white students. Not because people were necessarily bad, we just had systems, we trusted certain teachers. And then when we implemented standardized tests, we realized there are a whole lot of low-income kids, a whole lot of disadvantaged kids who ought to be considered as well. So my number one biggest concern is when we get rid of this test as required, a whole lot of students won't take it, many of whom would have scored well enough to improve their applications and would have caused admissions counselors to say, yes, 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 these are the students we need, as opposed to, we don't have that data, so they fall into the no bucket. So do you want to convince me that I'm wrong on that, or how should I think about that?
It's hard to convince somebody wrong when they have made a very, very thoughtful argument, and you have a very valid point. And I think all of us would agree that there are students out there that might be disadvantaged if they do not take the test itself. 2 or 3 comments that I would make, and if anybody else has additional things. First of all, by being test optional, we are not removing that as one of the factors in the list. And my hope would be that not only in our own admissions process, but working with our high school counselors, that in fact, if there are those students out there, that they would be encouraged to take the test and in fact submit those scores. And in their essays, for example, highlight exactly that point. Now, there's still going to be some that are missed, I'm sure. But I also believe that in this conversation between K-12 and higher education that needs to be strengthened, we need to also focus on encouraging our high schools to give students every opportunity. And an additional opportunity that we want to give them is not only the advanced placement courses and tests that they would take, and dual enrollment, because in fact, what we want to bring into our institutions is students that are truly college ready, not just because they have some innate ability, but they know the challenge that they are up against in college. And we believe that advanced placement and dual enrollment will in fact help prepare those students. There is no argument, but I am sure that there will be some students that are missed. This is a matter of balance on what is the best way to do this. And our considered suggestion is that we go optional rather than required.
Dr. Anderson, and then Dr. White.
Thank you, Chair. Just to respond, Vice Chancellor Baughman basically explained it very, very well. But I'll tell you, in our particular situation, given that we asked for permission to really test this test optional, what we found was that over 80% of the students ended up turning in their test anyway. So we did have the information, but we really were able to look at things in a more holistic manner. And that really levels the playing field and makes it a little bit more fair for the students. And especially, as you pointed out, students of color have really been discriminated against for years with the test. So we would also encourage the board to really consider moving forward with this, recognizing that students are going to submit the test anyway, and it is part of one of the many factors that we take under consideration, but it does level the playing field. Thank you.
So I would just argue that by removing the word mandatory and substituting it with optional allows students, all students, to submit their best package that shows their best strengths and case for admission.
Can I follow up on that? Because this is a very good point. What I'm concerned about is the students who have not done so well on their GPA. They were working a side job, so they couldn't do extracurriculars. A lot of teachers did encourage them to go to college. So they think, I'm not going to get in, I'm not going to take the SAT because it was optional. Had we said it is required, all of a sudden that student who was a 1 in 10 to go to college, all of a sudden gets 710 on the math portion of the SAT. And all of a sudden that student who didn't even himself or herself think he or she was college bound, now something else happened only because it was required. What about those students?
Regent Gill, did you have a comment? Regent Gill, did you have a comment?
I don't know, this might need to finish Andy's question. I think they have guidance counselors at all the schools. It seems to me there ought to be, there's interaction regularly with the students, with the college counselors. Excuse me, am I on? I'm just saying that it seems like the college counselors are going to answer some of what you're saying, if there's interaction with them about, should I do this, should I do that? And as it relates to the option of turn them in, I've always heard from different schools that if you have good SATs, turn them in. You don't, you won't be penalized.
Yeah.
And that's really what I've learned. One of the questions I did have from a standpoint of the analysis of the students, do all of our institutions, Joe, use the same software as it relates to the data analytics associated with the application? And
No,
do we use any tools I guess we use some tools on the data analytics side.
There are some on the data analytics side, and we do have the data on the scores of students, for example, but each institution has their own admissions process, and within that admissions process, they use a variety of comparative processes, both human eyes that in fact will have some bias associated with them. That's one of the reasons that we have committees and groups of multiple professionals looking at these applications, so that an individual's bias should not end up hurting any one individual student.
And do all of our schools have self-reporting grades for the applicants?
We get the transcripts electronically from the high schools.
So the kids don't enter the scores
No.
into that system?
No, we get those electronically. It's all transferred.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Good.
And wasn't there an action coming out of education and policy that you're going to look at the data
Yes.
over the next several years and see if there are any significant differences in the test optional versus the test mandatory?
Yeah, that's right, Madam Chair.
Absolutely, we are going to do that. And as President Pines indicated, we also are very concerned about any shifts in data due to the pandemic and learning loss, as it's being referred to, by students who in fact had much of their high school virtual. We know that even among our faculty, we know we did the very best we could when in fact we were required to go virtual, but there are some students that simply do not learn as well without the hands-on, literal face-to-face kind of interaction. And so we're going to be looking for those students that graduated during the pandemic and those that had some critical introductory courses in their junior high and high school, early high school years during the pandemic, because we are sure we're going to see some challenges there as well.
So we have Regent Pope, then Regent Breslin, and then Regent Wallace, and then Regent Beam. So we'll start with Regent Pope.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I come at it from a little bit different point of view, and I have 2 points and 2 questions. One, because such an emphasis would change the emphasis from SAT, ACT to simply grade point average in high school, which is would be the predominant measure. There's a lot of cases where you have late bloomers. And I know for myself, I got into the University of Maryland College Park during a very easy admission policy in the early 1970s. I thank you. But I did not have myself in gear when I was in 9th grade, 10th grade. My GPA was lousy because I didn't really get my act together until I was probably a junior or senior, and I did quite well. But my GPA was not at the high end. It really penalizes kids who are late bloomers in coming up that way. And I do think that tests do measure a person's breadth of knowledge, intellectual ability, IQ, a whole lot of things. So that's one point. The second point is I've heard for quite a while that there is either a racial bias or a socioeconomic bias in the ACT and the SAT. And certainly the SAT administrators have heard this. Can you tell us what has been done to try and change that? If it's such an issue, it seems like it could be changed by looking at the way the test is administered, the questions, the breadth of knowledge that students are expected to know. This is not a new issue. This has been around for quite a while. So what changes have been made in that regard?
Okay, two very quick comments there. First of all, we talk about GPA being a predictor, but we do not look at one number when an application comes in. We get the entire transcript. So the story that you just told would be, in fact, recorded in that transcript, and an admissions officer would be able to see a student who improved over time. So that's one point. On the cultural bias, there have been serious improvements made over the many years of the SAT, ACT, and other standardized tests. I think we are going to meet a greater challenge in the coming years. We have talked quite frequently about the increasing Latinx population. And I think the cultural differences in the language challenges that some of our population is going to have will be another factor, because these students who have English as their second language may have more of a challenge on some of these standardized tests.
Regent Breslin?
Yeah, I'm curious. I actually have two points or two questions. One is because we've been in an environment where we've had test optional period, do we know what percentage of students take the option to submit the testing? Because obviously it sounds like it's pretty noble if indeed the optional allows students to still take the test, so that they're not deprived of the opportunity that Andy was discussing. Yet obviously for the disadvantage and not having to take it. But my point is, do we know what percentage of students actually do still turn in the test during a period when it's test optional? And the second thing I'd like to say or ask is, with the record now again of being in this environment, and I didn't realize that Salisbury has been doing it for 15 years. Do we share the best practices among the things, and with College Park having 26 points for their admissions, I hope we share those, and that they would be able to work through this process so that we come up with some real admission standardization that would allow us to evaluate the students better.
Let me take your second point first. Our admissions offices do work together. They meet on a regular basis and do share best practices. We have looked to Salisbury for their experience over the several years. And in fact, the majority of students still do submit scores as they apply to Salisbury, even though they are test optional. The last 2 years are going to be a real problem, because the data are going to be greatly skewed, because the ACT and SAT simply were not given spring before last. People could not come into on the weekend into the high school and actually take the test. So we simply are missing data for the last 2 years, meaningful data. That's why College Park has suggested we want to look forward and see how these things are, how these data are looking with those that take the test and don't take the test.
And Dr. White, you wanted to add something?
I just wanted to clarify, before COVID, 30% of our applicants did not submit their standardized test data, but during COVID, 80% did not. Okay, so a big change due to COVID. But before COVID, only 30% were seeking admission without a standardized test.
So 70% still submit the test, yeah.
Okay, and it was Regent Wallace.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. I support this, and I wish that the testing was optional when I was applying to college many years ago. But my question is to the presidents here, and maybe this has come out, but is there any president here who feels that the testing should be mandatory and not optional? I'm just curious.
Nope.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're talking about all the reasons given but all of us know that the testing in SAT and ACT has become a corrupt industry over the last 10 years. And the amount of money that is being spent by families that are in a position to be able to do it is amazing. And so the disadvantage is really the fact that the industry itself has increasingly become corrupt on those two scales.
Okay, Regent Beam, you get our
Thank you.
last question.
Thank you. Vice Chancellor Boffman and I, along with Zakia, talked a little bit because my concerns were different. I absolutely understand the need for this shift, and I think that test optional, as we've clearly outlined, can greatly benefit a lot of students. I'm preparing for my MCAT in August, and the ability to not work and for some people to take these $2,000+ classes, that's just not an option for most people. So it really does disadvantage certain populations. And I want to circle back to something that we've talked a lot about during my tenure this past year on the board, which is specifically STEM students. And will there be, will certain programs have differential ability to require tests, or will this be universal within the school? Okay, universal within the school. That was my real concern. That was my only concern, basically, was that some programs, I'm thinking about at College Park, for example, business school, STEM programs might still want them, but no. Okay. And then how have we considered, and is there a process in place for transitioning students? I know SAT and stuff can sometimes be used for admittance into specifically LEP, limited enrollment programs. Is there a process in place to help students transition or to ease the transition between programs in the absence of certain metrics, or is that not an issue at all?
I was just going to say, I mean, the fact that we have placement exams will let us know the levels of skills. I wrote the questions for the AP, AB and BC calculus. People take that. They take that. So, that lets you know when students are really good, right? But for the other students, we have math placement exams that will give you the pre-calculus background. It's the math skills, and then fundamental reading skills would be the other area where we look to see, are they able to handle the work?
But those placement exams won't be administered until after acceptance, correct?
Until after acceptance. But we also know the schools and the grading practices in schools and school systems. We have had years of experience in knowing what an A means at a certain school, or a B or a C.
And the last really brief point I wanted to make was just that I think to students coming up through high school, it's not entirely clear that this won't be a detriment. So I think finding a way to communicate more clearly to students that if you submit it, it's not going to hurt your chances of getting in. And if you don't submit it at all, that also doesn't negatively affect your chances of getting in, because I've heard so much from young people as well as my peers that they were concerned about that applying to college. So I want to encourage the presidents to think about their communication materials and how we make sure that that's crystal clear, especially to those low-income and disadvantaged students from different backgrounds.
So Regent Wood and Tola and Regent Atola both have additional comments.
I just have one quick comment, and that is for a student who's a late bloomer and gets interested towards the end of high school, that student still would have the option to take the test to prove that they are capable of admission and doing the work. So the option would be there to cure that problem.
Yeah, sorry, just to further stress the point about those late bloomers. In my personal experience, I was that late bloomer. So it feels like, if I'm understanding correctly, that the worry is students taking initiative to take the test in the absence of it being a mandatory requirement. I feel like, in my experience of what I've seen, the experience of other students, that this would just be an opportunity for them to put their best foot forward and put the best possible application out there. So students that may have better GPAs or higher GPAs and may be worried about how maybe a low test score might reflect upon that GPA and may not have to submit that test. And students like me who were coming to a later realization in their high school experiences that they did want to go to college, may not have had the best GPAs. This would now give them an opportunity to put more emphasis on, taking efforts to get better test scores to put that best foot forward. So that was my personal experience as I came to the realization later on in my high school experience that I wanted to go to college. I took the SAT multiple times, even though it wasn't required that I did, to have a better score and eventually, ending up at Bowie State. So I think that would just really address those concerns about student initiatives or students taking the initiative to take the test in the absence of it being mandatory.
Okay, we'll call for a vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'd like to hear a motion to approve the proposed amendments to the USM policy on undergraduate admissions.
Second? All in favor? Any opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, the vote carries. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
And now we'll move to the Committee of the Whole. And our first action is the affirmation of the selection of the new SU president. Salisbury University President Chuck White has been with us since 2018, will be retiring next month. Last fall, we began the process to select his successor. Regent Rao chaired the SU President Search and Screening Committee. He was assisted by Regent Andy Smerrick, Senior Vice Chancellor Joe Boffman, and Executive Search Firm Academic Search. A dynamic search committee, faculty, staff, students, alumni, and community members reviewed an impressive applicant pool and sent the board 4 very strong candidates. The board selected Dr. Carolyn Ringer Lepre to serve as the next president of SU. Dr. Lepre is currently serving as the interim president at Radford University. Prior to assuming this role, she was provost and vice president of academic affairs at Radford. She is sure to build on President Wright's commitment to students, diversity, and the region. Regent Rao is not here today, so before I ask the board to affirm the selection of Dr. Lepre, I would like to invite Regent Smerrick and Chancellor Perman to offer any additional insights.
As Chair Gooden mentioned, thanks to the invitation of President White, we had the privilege yesterday, together with several regents, of participating in a Salisbury University tradition, the passing of the mace from the current president to the new president. I tell you this because it gave me a chance, having not seen President Lepre in person since you all interviewed her, to spend some time with her again. And I would simply say here in public that the Regents have made an excellent choice, in my judgment.
Yeah, the only thing that I would like to add is my thanks to the folks on the ground who were on the search committee. It's, speaking for myself, it's always very important to think about how the community thinks about the school and vice versa, and to make sure that the community in all of its aspects, business, cultural organizations, faith-based organizations, feel like that they are part of the system and that they are part of the conversation. And the group that was assembled by the chair, thank you so much, did an extraordinary job, and it led to some of the best discussions, and I think led to a great result. So it feels like the right decision for the school and the region and the city itself. So thank you.
So I'll move that the board affirm its selection of Dr. Carolyn Ringer Lepre as the next president of Salisbury University. Do I hear a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. I would also like to thank Regent Rao for his leadership, along with that of Senior Vice Chancellor Boffman. Additionally, I'd like to thank the members of the search committee for their outstanding work throughout this process. You have before you, for your consideration, a proposed schedule for the full board meetings to be held in 2023 and 2024. All meetings will begin at 8:30, except in April and September, which start at 9 to accommodate the faculty and the staff award ceremonies. Do I have a motion to approve the schedule? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Could I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Is there any indication as to how many of these will be in person and how many meetings will be virtual, or are they all in person?
All of the board meetings will be in person unless there's another health emergency that causes us to go in a different direction. But our intention is to have all of the board meetings in person, and the committee meetings will remain either virtual or hybrid, depending on what the committee chairs elect.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Our next area is one that is, kind of good, kind of bad, because we hate to see people leave. I mentioned in my opening remarks that we have several regents who have or are leaving the board, as well as 2 presidents stepping down from their posts. To commemorate their service, we have prepared resolutions of appreciation for their service. Regent Johnson's service on the board spanned 6 years. She brought her keen perspective and passion for students to her service on the education policy and student life, governance and compensation, and advancement committees, and as chair of the 2018 Salisbury University Search. Regent Gill has been a longtime supporter of the USM and brought a strong business acumen to the board. He chaired the Advancement Committee and served on the ICA Committee, as well as Audit and Finance. Regent Beam served on the Strategic Plan Work Group and brought the student voice, and the committees on Education Policy and Student Life and Economic Development. She consistently provided thoughtful comments and questions and brought the student perspective to meetings. Regent Beams, thank you for your service, and we wish you well as you'll complete your studies. I hear medical school may be in the offing, and so good luck with that. President White, you became president in 2018, succeeding a long-serving president. Such succession typically isn't easy, but you quickly became a beloved and impactful president. You've advanced Salisbury University in so many ways, specifically in terms of its national recognition, focus on diversity, external relationships in the region, and donor relations. Thank you. And President Hrabowski, what can we say that hasn't already been said? You have been a stalwart of the USM for over 30 years, bringing UMBC to national prominence and always putting students first. Your tireless advocacy has left a legacy of students, academics, and other professionals who are making their mark and continuing to work their work on inclusive excellence in their respective spheres. And you're the only person that I'm aware of that has a grant for 1.5 billion with a B in his name. Thank you, Freeman, for all that you've done for the system, for UMBC, for academia in general, and for me personally. Thank you. So may I get a motion to approve the resolutions for Regent Beams, Gill, Johnson, and Presidents Hrabowski and White? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motions carry, and the complete resolutions are in your notebooks. Finally, you also have before you the Board of Region committees and work group assignments for the next year. As outlined in the board's bylaws, the board chair shall, after consulting with the members of the board, appoint members to each of the standing committees for the coming year. In addition, the chairperson of the board designates the chairperson and the vice chairperson of each standing committee in collaboration with the chancellor. In making such appointments, the person shall determine the number of members on each standing committee. In case of a vacancy on a committee, the chairperson and the board may appoint a new member for the unexpired term. Each committee member shall serve at the pleasure of the board. The roster is included with your material and does not require a vote. I appreciate your willingness to serve and look forward to another productive year. We do a lot of work in committees, as all of you know, and it does take a fair amount of time. So I really want to thank all of the chairs and the members of the committees and the work groups. As you saw, the work groups worked very hard as well. The strategic plan, Jeff thought that he was giving up the work group and found that the implementation plan is the next phase. And so we're moving on to that. And so thank you very much for your time and your dedication to these worthwhile endeavors. The year is over. It's been a great year. I want to thank the chancellor and all of the staff. We received our largest budget increase ever, 26% improvement. So let's give a round of applause to the staff and the chancellor. And I'd like to thank all of the regions. I do think this is the hardest working commission. And so what would you say, Mike? Pretty hard working for our commission.
That's why it's the best one in the entire state of Maryland.
All right. So let's give a round of applause to for the region. So this includes the public session. Let me close by expressing my thanks and appreciation to the entire staff and faculty. Your contributions at every level, at every exchange, results in the system's success and in its prominence. Regents, Chancellor Perman, presidents, and everyone in the room have a wonderful summer and a joyous commemorative Juneteenth. As we convene to close session, let me read the opening meeting statement. The Open Meetings Act permits public bodies to close their meetings to the public in circumstances outlined in 3-305 of the Act and to carry out administrative functions exempted by 3-103 of the Act. The Board of Regents will now vote to reconvene in closed session. The agenda for the public meeting today includes a written statement with a citation of the legal authority and reasons for closing the meeting and a listing of the topics to be discussed. The statement has been provided to the regions and it's posted on the USM's website. Do I have a motion to close? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the public meeting is closed.